Hello, and first welcome, Bob Marley. Always great to see you, and always thankful to have you pass by. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying your last, I guess, few days of freedom. And it sounds like, at least based off of what you shared, that you had overall a good summer with, as usual, I think lots of travel, hopefully lots of rest and relaxation, in addition to working out and all that good stuff. And also, I hope that your medical questions were answered and that whatever treatment was prescribed given is like beneficial to you. uh and yeah, I'm hoping that it's going to be a successful academic term for you. uh oh wow, well then congratulations. What is your bench PR? I think before you were at, I think, like 225, 230, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. Or I guess in kilograms, 100 kilograms, if I remember correctly. Was like around your PR. But yeah, that's fantastic, and I have no doubt that obviously you're gonna get stronger and stronger. Now I've been slowly inching my way up to my previous PR, I guess pre-pandemic PR, which is like, yeah, around 100, 105 kilograms. Maybe once I get there, I'll push for more, but I don't know if I will. Uh, I think for the next little while, I'm gonna focus on a lot of uh, aerobic workouts, more cardiovascular. Hit 110 after being ill half the summer, so I couldn't get punches. Oh wow! Well then, congratulations. That is fantastic. And I think it's a good testament, and hopefully a good experience to give you confidence that time away from the gym, even illness, will not necessarily result in this huge setback. Or even if it is a setback, you can typically, especially given the fact that you're much younger than I am, you can bounce back really quickly. And that very often, time away from the gym, you've been training consistently for a long time. I say it over and over, and this is, advice, or this is in the category of advice of like, do as I say, not as I do. In terms of like, I struggle, although I'm not as good with recovery as I should. And I know that. And it's always sort of a work in progress for me. Uh, and that has always been my experience of like, of the times where I train very intensely and very intensely for a long amount of time. And, I sort of approach my limits of overtraining, or like even getting into that overtraining zone. Once I like step back and take some time off from the gym, I virtually always come back stronger. Uh, yeah, it always, let's say, just increases my confidence, because I have, uh, as I share, always difficulties taking time off from the gym, just because like it's kind of like a pillar of my life in terms of maintaining energy levels, in terms of maintaining my mental health, and obviously my physical health, etc., etc. And also, I just love being active. In addition to the gyms that I go to, it's also at this point part of my social network, of like, I know quite a lot of people at the gym, and it's an overall welcoming environment. And it's also just like, I get that both mix of physical activity, the social aspect as well. So like when that is absent from my life for a prolonged period of time, it's like sort of a double whammy of like, yeah, no physical activity and then less social engagement and less social interaction. But yeah, I'm really happy for you, and I have no doubt that 315 is like on the horizon on the next year or two. 315 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilograms. I guess that's like whatever, 140 kilograms. We'll be dropping 100 kilograms at the moment. I can lead reps, but yeah, absolutely. It's always a good feeling to feel strong, and totally, just ego lifting is a thing. Make sure that you're aware of it, and that you don't go overboard. This all like definitely something I can sometimes, occasionally, fall prey to. But I always try to keep my ego in check, or at least make an attempt, probably maybe unsuccessfully. But yeah, I am back. Uh, I streamed yesterday, which was great. As always, a great stream. After a little bit of a hiatus, about a week and a half, because as I shared in the Discord, sleep has just like been a nightmare. Past couple weeks, or I guess week and a half, or at least 1 week, and then the past few days have been fine. Where I'm on day 11 of being caffeine free, no caffeine consumption, which, as I mentioned yesterday, has been a challenge. Even though, like I said, I did not think I consumed that much caffeine. Like I said, the equivalent of about 2 cups of coffee in the morning before going to the gym. And as an experiment, since I more or less have been trying multiple things, this is like one of the last things to attempt. But like, well, even though I don't think I'm consuming that much caffeine, I figured I might as well cut it out to control all the variables that I can control. Yeah, exactly. That's why I say the equivalent of 2 cups of coffee, because I recognize that talking about pre-workout is not going to be familiar to the general audience. Even though I know I have probably some fitness enthusiasts, quite a few fitness enthusiasts in my community. But still, yeah. In terms of like the caffeine content alone, the equivalent of 2 cups of coffee. So your standard cup of coffee, I think, is around 50 to 80 milligrams of caffeine. And so my pre-workout, 1 scoop, and I take an effort to limit it to 1 scoop. It is about 150 milligrams. So yeah, about 2 cups coffee, maybe a cup and a half, I guess, depending on the drink. And I only consume pre-workout in the morning, never after noon. Again, with the intention so that it doesn't affect my sleep. But I guess it was, because I've been caffeine free for 11 days, and the past 4 or 5 days, my sleep has been not great, but definitely an improvement over last week. Last night, I got, I think, around 5-6 hours of sleep. It's totally not the greatest for me, but that is decent enough. I can sort of like function and feel like myself, as opposed to last week. I think I was averaging like 2 or 3 hours per night. So that gives me hope, and yeah, I'm glad that things appear to be on the up and up. And maybe this is just my life now of no caffeine consumption. So caffeine withdrawal is a thing, although it's definitely not the same as your, I guess, more stereotypical withdrawal, let's say from opioids or benzodiazepines, alcohol. The withdrawal that I experience, and like whether it's, I mean, yeah, it's definitely a withdrawal because there is some sort of physical dependency, and there are physiological changes that occur when you consume caffeine regularly. And I consulted the research when I was contemplating cutting out caffeine. But yeah, I had like a low-grade headache for about 4 or 5 days, and that was based. And obviously, I had lower energy levels, and whatever, just overall fatigue because no caffeine. And I guess it highlighted maybe again how much I was depending on it, maybe too dependent, and that I should ideally, I guess ideally we should all be relying on good quality sleep, and not stimulants to get through our day, right? Although that might be a little bit of utopian thinking. But yeah, I just had a low-grade headache and some, lack of energy for about 4 or 5 days. And then my sleep started to slowly improve. And it seems like it is ever so slowly improving. I think, I'm, whatever, back to baseline in terms of whatever, what my body operates at. in the absence of caffeine, I don't think it takes that long to recover from, dependence on caffeine. I don't think. Because even though there are physiological changes that occur with regular consumption of caffeine, they're not like, they're definitely not the same as, opioids or alcohol or benzodiazepine. And that appears to be backed up in the research, at least the research that I consulted. So, I might have to reevaluate my relationship with caffeine moving forward. Maybe moderate it even more heavily. Instead of having the equivalent of 2 cups of coffee in the morning, maybe just 1 cup. Maybe just half a cup. I don't know. Or maybe just reserve caffeine consumption for when I really need it. I don't know. We'll see. But so far, I'm somewhat satisfied with the results. I drink caffeine during the months while I'm at uni, but cut it out from one day to the other when I'm on holiday. Well, so there's also the fact that caffeine is metabolized differently by different people. And there are, slow metabolizers, fast metabolizers, and there are those who are, let's say, really slow metabolizers. This is basically just as a result of your genetic background. Oh, and Kitty, welcome. Great to see you again. And thank you for the kind words. I'm also glad that I'm sleeping better. Not the best, but definitely better. I would definitely take this over the past couple of weeks. But yeah, based off of what I read, the research, well, the typical half-life of caffeine in your system is about 4 to 6 hours. But for some people, it can linger in their system much, much longer. And that they're slow metabolizers. Maybe, I have no idea, I'm just speculating. Maybe I'm in that category of very slow metabolizers, and just caffeine lingers in my system way longer than it should be. Oh, and Witchy, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. How are you doing? Hope you're doing well. And I'll take that as a compliment of a perfect person to watch while high. Those are very kind words. I'm doing pretty well. I'm just sharing my recent struggles with sleep, but my sleep is getting better. So I'm in a much better mood and place overall. And I hope you're in a nice state of relaxation. And that, I add to the highness as opposed to take away from it. Will the amount of withdrawal someone gets be correlated with the amount of effects someone feels? Okay, because I don't feel effects either. So that's the thing, Bob Marley. So I experienced the same thing when I consume caffeine. At this point, rather rewinding 2 weeks ago when I consumed caffeine, I wasn't getting these great energizing effects. It was mostly just part of my baseline. Now I just have a new baseline. So I still woke up feeling tired, and even after consuming the caffeine, like a couple hours later, if I really wanted to, I probably could take a nap, no problem, still fall asleep. And thank you so much, Witchy. That actually means a lot to me, because sleep these days has been a struggle up until recently with my experiment with cutting out caffeine, which so far has been successful. And maybe I should share, do I have the study that I got out? Let's see. No, I didn't save it. I could look it up. Oh, and Lesbian Hot Sauce, welcome. Great to see you again. And shout out to you. Hope you're doing well. And also glad to read that your dog is doing okay. Hopefully much better and on the road to recovery. See if I can properly... Yeah, if you're not following Lesbian Hot Sauce, you absolutely should be. And we're going to be having a discussion in about 8 or 9 days about long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome, going over some of the research, etc., etc. So very much looking forward to that. And as mentioned, I'm going to be brushing up on a lot of the long COVID research up until then. And also, thank you again for sending all the research that you did in the Discord. It was great. And also, it led me down to diving deeper into the that vein of research and PRs and chronic fatigue syndrome. But let's see if I can find this caffeine research that I found. 1 second. I found it.
Welcome to Flavor Country.
Oh wow, No Pants Kyle. Welcome. And Wick, thank you so much for the raid. 82 viewers, wow. I hope you had a great stream, which I know you did because I was watching a little bit before I went live with your talk with Allison and, you know, psychiatry, mental health, and mental illness. Welcome, Raiders. I am Corey Campbell. I'm a biochemist, and I'm occasionally on Wick's panels as a very radical leftist, saying random stuff. And I cover science research news, which we're going over now. We're going to be going over shortly some MDMA research and some psilocybin microdosing research. And thank you so much for the follow, Zesty, 459. And thank you, No Pants Kyle. Super appreciated for the follow. And shout out to Wick. I already gave a shout out. I'll have to
Welcome
use
to Flavor Country.
this. But I mean, I think virtually everyone knows about Wick these days, since I think there's a lot of overlap in our audiences. And thank you so much for the follow, Nitsuit212, and welcome Ocho Gringo. Well, so I've been talking about Ocho Gringo about my experiment with cutting out caffeine. I am now officially 11 days caffeine free because that was my attempt to hopefully improve my sleep, because my sleep has been pretty awful the past couple weeks. And so far, my experiment for me is successful. That cutting out caffeine has improved my sleep. So one of the studies that I came across when, you know, contemplating going off of caffeine is this one. Because, so I think virtually everyone knows that, you know, ideally not a good idea to consume caffeine right before bed. But there's not a lot of research looking into what happens when you consume caffeine in the morning. And like, does the caffeine leave your system, you know, 12, 18 hours later when you're ready to go to sleep? Let me just catch up. I think I missed. Oh, Testy Johnson, welcome. Always great to see you. And thank you so much for the lurk, Witchy. Super appreciated. And I did get headaches while withdrawing. I had a low-grade headache for about 4 or 5 days. And then it went away. It wasn't painful. It was mostly just like mild discomfort. On a scale of like 1 to 10, it was like, you know, 3, at most 4. I wouldn't really call it painful, just maybe like a mild to moderate throbbing in my head for about 4 or 5 days. I definitely felt it, and it was annoying, but not painful. And I'm the type of person that doesn't get headaches. I get a headache maybe like once or twice per year. Headaches are super rare for me. And yeah, chronic fatigue syndrome is super interesting. And I've researched it before on my own because, well, it's sort of, there's hypotheses put forth that it's an autoimmune condition. Oh, thank you so much for the follow, Ocho Gringo. Super appreciated. Great to have you here. And since, you know, I have an autoimmune condition myself, you know, I follow the research on other autoimmune conditions, and chronic fatigue syndrome might be falling in that category, or there definitely appears to be an immune system component that we're trying to, I think, tease out and understand. Uh, and I'm sorry to hear that you have that your cousin has it, because yeah, it appears to be severely debilitating. The curly hair tutorial. Do I have curly hair? Um, so this study was carried out to specifically look at what happens on nighttime sleep in young adult men when you consume caffeine in the morning. It's like not right before bed. It's trying to ask the question like, does caffeine still affect you and your sleep if you consume it in the morning? And then hopefully it's cleared from your system. And basically, the answer appears to be that there's no major, as in, you can consume caffeine in the morning, and it seems like caffeine leaves your body, and it doesn't really seem to have that much of an effect on your sleep when you consume it in the morning. There appears to be like a very mild effect, and they attribute it to the actual withdrawal that's occurring. But pretty much like no major effect, largely in the discussion. And they actually do some brain recordings, as in the people in this study, the young adult males, they actually went into a sleep lab and, had their sleep recorded. So, what their overall findings were. The aim of the present study was to investigate the influence of daily daytime caffeine intake and its cessation on nighttime sleep. So again, caffeine in the morning, way before bed. Pretty much like the longest lag time that you can get between caffeine consumption and sleep. Which that was my strategy when I consumed it. I only consumed it in the morning. I didn't consume caffeine in the afternoons. And yeah, consumers under strictly controlled laboratory conditions. So again, this is more or less not an official sleep study, but they weren't relying on like self-reports. Like they are recording like sleep activity. Strikingly, caffeine consumption did not lead to clear-cut changes in nighttime sleep structure, nor in subjective sleep quality when assessed 8 and 15 hours after the last intake in the caffeine and withdrawal. Oh, wow, thank you so much for the gifted sub, the peer review. Super appreciated. And if you're not following the peer review, you absolutely should be, because they have a YouTube channel that I have here. Link ready. That I'm subscribed to, and everyone else should be subscribed to. But that's super generous. And thank you again for your support. So the evolution of subjective withdrawal symptoms indicates that withdrawal becomes perceivable at earliest between 27 and 31 after intake. And I agree with you, the peer review, that paper pile is better than Mendeley. Although I'm just, since I started using Mendeley like 10 years ago, I'm so ingrained in the ecosystem, even though I want to change and should change. Ooh, I believe this is like your own. This is your own publication. Okay. Well, I'm gonna save this. And certainly cover this, maybe like even just tomorrow. High aspect ratio nanomaterials. So I probably will not understand everything since I don't really like plants all that much. But I think, okay, yeah, I can understand this stuff. Oh, this is supplemental. Where is the main abstract? Website. Oh. Reactive oxygen species. Yes. Okay. Cool. I'm definitely gonna check it out. The view PDF. Oh, right. Right there.
Welcome to Flavor Country.
Brian Lore, thank you so much for the follow. Super appreciated. Okay, yes. This, I understand. Well, I'm gonna have to look at this off stream and make sure that I digest it. but I'm probably going to cover this like probably tomorrow or the day after. Because like, yeah, this is your own research. And ever want to talk about it, or I'll probably have to ask you some questions about it. I'm probably going to message you on Discord at some point, just to make sure I understand everything. But super cool, and congratulations. That's awesome. Good for you. I assume this is part of your PhD research. And let's see when. Yeah, so accepted for. So yeah, this is pretty much hot off the press. Super cool. Yeah, that makes total sense. So, wrapping up, my story with caffeine. Basically, we conclude that daily daytime intake of caffeine does not strongly influence nighttime sleep structure nor subjective sleep quality in healthy men when consumed in the morning, midday, and in the afternoon. In contrast to the reported increases in sigma activity after acute caffeine intake, the observed changes in the sigma frequencies might point to early signs of caffeine withdrawal, which occur due to overnight abstinence and presumably derive from preceding caffeine-induced changes in identity, blah, blah, blah. So essentially, okay, yeah, consuming caffeine in the morning doesn't really have that much effect on your either objective or subjective sleep quality. They are noticing some changes when they actually, record the brain activity, but they associate these changes with the actual withdrawal basically being induced as you are sleeping. As in, pretty much, since you consume caffeine in the morning, withdrawal sets in around like 18 hours later. And that's pretty much the withdrawal sets in while you're sleeping. And so what they're essentially saying is like the changes that they're measuring at the level of the brain, it's associated with the withdrawal that's occurring as you're sleeping. And that, pretty much that will go away, or rather, your morning consumption of caffeine is, that's your next hit, so to speak. Since, well, I mean, caffeine is a drug, most widely consumed drug. I definitely partake, or did partake in that, up until like 11 days ago, super regularly. So even though, this is like one of the few pieces of research that actually appears to assess in a controlled manner what happens when you consume caffeine in the morning. Does it affect your nighttime sleep? The answer appears to be largely not really any effect, or if anything, like a mild effect. But even then, I still cut out caffeine, and I'm still cutting out caffeine, and it seems like that's going to be my life for now on, just like caffeine-free maybe, or really cutting back my intake. Even though I followed recommended guidelines and never consumed that much. Maybe I'm just caffeine sensitive. Who knows? But getting into one of the main topics, my stream title. Let's see, make sure I want to do. Okay. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So yesterday, I gave sort of a hint of what I wanted to cover today. And this is the study that we're going to go over in depth. And this is, as I mentioned yesterday, this is a follow-up study. Okay, this is a follow-up study of another study that I've covered before, about over a year ago. This study, okay? And it's the overall same research group. This study, I did a deep dive on it a little over a year ago. I did like a whole stream devoted to covering multiple studies about MDMA. And this is what was one of them. And this was for severe PTSD. This is a phase 3, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. And as you can see, it includes a lot of researchers. It's a collaboration, and this is, I think, the MAP, the MAP2 study collaborator group. It's essentially devoted to MDMA research for PTSD. And what they found from this study, which was 2021, so a couple years ago, pretty new, was that or severe PTSD. I should probably just read the overall conclusion. Basically, it appeared to be quite effective. In summary, MDMA-assisted therapy induces a rapid onset of treatment efficacy, even in those with severe PTSD, and in those with associated comorbidities, including dissociative PTSD, depression, history of alcohol and substance use disorders, and childhood trauma. Not only is MDMA-assisted therapy efficacious in individuals with severe PTSD, but it may also provide improved patient safety. Compared with current first-line pharmacological and behavioral therapies, MDMA-assisted therapy has the potential to dramatically transform treatment for PTSD and should be expeditiously evaluated for clinical use. And as they highlight, seems to be super effective. And what is arguably most promising is they're assessing a patient group that is difficult to treat. This is severe PTSD. And as they highlight, when they give the background, is like, I think I read it just yesterday, that 40 to 60% of patients do not respond to compounds, even though there are therapies that are available to treat PTSD, both pharmacological and non-pharmacological. Basically, a large proportion of patients with severe PTSD don't respond. So there's a huge unmet need for these patients. And this is where, based off of this research, this MDMA-assisted therapy seemed to be super promising because if it actually holds true, might be like the most effective therapy that we have for severe PTSD. So, at least as of now.
Welcome to Flavor Country.
Oh, and Toki, I apologize if I mispronounced. Toki Heket, thanks so much for the follow. Super appreciated. Happy to have you here. This, or rather this, is a follow-up of this. That's why, you know, the titles are pretty much identical. They're very close. And I've highlighted some of the noteworthy authors. So it's the same first author. Here you have Jennifer M. Mitchell, and the other one, Jennifer M. Mitchell. And you have this Bessel van der Kolk, as I highlighted yesterday. This is, you know, pretty, whatever, decently notorious psychiatrist. Not notorious in a bad way, but basically a person of notoriety in the mental health and I guess trauma treatment. And they also wrote a book that I also brought up yesterday. Which is this book, which I think many people know of, but if you don't, yeah, that's the author, Bessel van der Kolk. Pretty much, that is their it appears to be their specialty, is trauma. And they're involved in this research, and also in the past one. So this is a follow-up, okay? And now, before, they were looking at severe PTSD. Now they are including both moderate to severe PTSD. So they're expanding a little bit. And there's also another twist or something different in this one is they're expanding their demographics, so to speak. Or rather, they're increasing the diversity of the patients that they are including in trials. Where here, if you look at the demographics, oh yeah, like, pretty much it's psychedelic research is now in the mainstream, has been for a little while, or maybe like, yeah, at least when it comes to high impact, you know, nature science research. Like, it's definitely, has taken off in the past 3 to 5 years, for sure. Oh, and Simcelbit, welcome. I have no idea what 222 means. But yeah, so in this first study, you know, no surprise, pretty common in research. They are largely assessing, you know, Caucasian people. Especially in the MDMA-assisted therapy, you know, it's 84% white. Which is not inherently a bad thing. The limitation of the study. So here, they make They appear to make an intentional attempt to increase the diversity of the patients that are included in the trials. And they highlight that. We're going to go over it, but just, I guess, to show it. The other ones, it was about 85%. This one, now it's down to 70%. And they have pretty much, as they say here, we're ethnically and racially diverse, or definitely more diverse than the past study a couple years ago. So, post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is a serious neuropsychiatric condition affecting approximately 5% of the US population each year. Managing PTSD is particularly complicated in individuals experiencing the dissociative subtype of PTSD. Recurrent exposure to trauma and comorbidities such as mood disorders and alcohol and substance disorder. Together, these factors are associated with symptom exacerbation, treatment resistance, and treatment discontinuation. Trauma-focused psychotherapies are the gold standard treatment for PTSD. So yeah, they're the gold standard, as they're going to say. This gold standard is pretty much not that effective, or that there's a very significant number of patients, or proportion of patients, that just don't respond or poorly respond to this gold standard treatment. That's why they're, assessing whether psychedelics, and specifically MDMA-assisted therapy, can meet that unmet need. No, definitely not. Based off of what I remember of the structure, I don't even think it's methylene deoxymethamphetamine. Yeah, this is definitely not cookie-like, but totally a valid question. And welcome, Droid Insanity. Great to have you here. But maybe, I have no doubt that MDMA will enhance sugar cooking eating experience. So yeah, despite this gold standard treatment that they have, many individuals have persisting symptomology and dropout rates are high. And this dropout rate that they speak about, this also appears to be, as we will see, one of the key advantages with the MDMA-assisted therapy, where, one of the challenges when it comes to treatment, or just about anything, is compliance. There's the difference between prescribing the treatment and can the patient actually, keep with the treatment. And it seems like the MDMA-assisted therapy, as we will see, there appears to be a high rate of compliance. Or, to put it another way, there's a very low, if not non-existent, dropout rate. Although the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, sertraline and paroxetine are FDA approved for treating PTSD, 35 to 47% of individuals do not respond to treatment. More effective therapeutic interventions are needed to address the immense individual, societal, and economic burdens of PTSD. Mounting evidence supports substituted phenethylamine 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine assisted therapy, or MDMA-AT, as a treatment for PTSD. So MDMA, an entactogen that promotes monoamine reuptake inhibition and release, primarily by inducing conformational change in presynaptic transporters, effectively modulates fear memory reconsolidation, enhances fear extinction, and promotes openness and pro-social behavior. I think, I think the openness and the pro-social behavior, I think that's probably one of the reasons why people take it recreationally. And I'm definitely not an expert when it comes to psychedelics, and especially psychedelic-assisted therapy or MDMA-assisted therapy. But from what I understand, limited, about MDMA's effects, or its subjective effects, without getting into the neurological and biochemical changes, it's this greater openness, and sort of I think, making one open to, confronting their feelings, or negative feelings, and as they say, enhances fear extinction, and modulates fear memory reconsolidation. Kind of sort of getting someone to a state, or in a place where they can actually, confront or grapple with the negative feelings, experiences, or, the trauma, I guess in this case. I think sort of like a dual effect of open to it, and then now you maybe sort of feel empowered to actually confront or grapple with those feelings. Well, I've spoken to Destiny multiple times, not about their psychedelic use, but maybe I should at some point, because I know that they take psychedelics, and they appear to be a pretty big proponent of psychedelics. So several phase 2 trials indicated that MDMA-assisted therapy has an acceptable risk-benefit profile in individuals with PTSD. A pivotal phase 3 study, MAP-1, which I believe they're referring to past research here, I believe this is the MAP-1, showed that MDMA-assisted therapy was generally well tolerated and met the trial's primary and secondary endpoints of reduced PTSD symptom severity and decreased functional impairment. Yeah, no judgment on anyone that does it, but I'm probably not ready to do MDMA. Maybe at some point down the road, but I'll be the first to kind of admit that I have zero personal experience with psychedelics. I cannot speak personally about the subjective experience. I only go by what I read in the... and that's just like a personal choice on me. But if there's one psychedelic that I would be most willing to try, it probably would be MDMA. Based off of what I know of its safety profile. And also from what I understand of its subjective effects, and also what it appears to, at least from what we can tell, what it does to your brain. Not that we perfectly know exactly what it does to your brain, but there's more and more research coming out. And I have some of it. Maybe we'll go over it if we have time, of the changes that occur in the brain. And actually, there's an interesting thing here that they're going to cover upon. So this is a randomized placebo-controlled trial. But, can you actually do a randomized placebo-controlled trial with a psychedelic? That is one of the challenges with psychedelic research, And you trick someone into thinking that they're taking a psychedelic when they're actually not. And they actually, as we'll see, they actually survey the people. They survey the people in the placebo group, and they survey the people in the MDMA group. And there are people in the placebo group that they will testify that they got MDMA. That when we're going to see it. That there's a minority of people that, hey, where do you think you were in the study? Do you think you got the placebo, or do you think you actually got the MDMA? And there's a proportion of people that got it wrong. Both people in the placebo group thinking they got MDMA, and it's a smaller number, a very small minority, but a minority of people in the MDMA group that thought they got the placebo. That's the funny thing. I think I would like to think I would know whether I was on a psychedelic, but I have no personal experience with them, right? So, like, I have no idea what the subjective experience is like. Would I actually know it if I ever inadvertently, took it, or, if I was involved in a study like this? Really hard to say. In terms of safety profile, yeah, from what I also understand, Kitty, like psilocybin also does appear to be pretty safe, from what I gather. Not saying it is safe. I think from what I have read in the research, it appears to have a pretty good safety profile. But I think okay, no longer working. But just in terms of from what I know of the subjective effects of psilocybin versus MDMA, I think I don't know for sure, but based off of how these subjective experiences are described, I think I would probably prefer MDMA psilocybin when controlling for safety profile. Uh, so lowest to be barely noticed. So I don't know the standard dosages for MDMA, or like I don't know what the recreational dosages of MDMA are. But for here in this study, the minimum dosage was 120 milligrams. Now, whether that's high or low, I have no idea. They're going by what's been used, what's been shown to be effective, right? We're not really looking to induce, a great subjective experience. They're going with the bare minimum of what appears to be effective, right? And they also have a pretty, what I would say, interesting dosing regimen, where they start off with, as we will see, I guess I'm kind of spoiling it, but they start off with, sort of giving
Welcome to
one
Flavor
single
Country.
high dose. Oh, Admiral Gibbs, welcome. Well, great to see you here, and I definitely know you from being on multiple panels with you now. Hope you're doing well, and great to see you here and interact with you on Prime's panels. Thank you so much for the follows. Appreciate it. But yeah, for here in this study, they use a strategy of like during the MDMA sessions, they give like a high dose at the beginning, and then they wait 2 hours, and then they give another low dose. So the dosages range from about 120 to 180 milligrams, and they start off with, okay, at the beginning of the session, we give you 120 milligrams, and then 2 hours later, we give you like an extra dose of like 40 to 60 milligrams. What do you night out from what yeah, I don't know what the recreational doses of MDMA are. What do you mean by safer for these drugs? So that is an excellent question. I don't think we have great long-term data on safety data on psychedelics. I mean, we're mostly going by the recreational population, and that there doesn't seem to be so far like major safety concerns with assuming you're actually taking MDMA. I think when it comes to recreational use, I think most of the safety concerns come from, are you actually consuming what you're supposed to be allegedly consuming, or are you actually consuming what you paid for? So several phase 2 trials indicate that MDMA-assisted therapy has an acceptable risk-benefit profile in individuals. Oh yeah, I already read that. So due to disparities in trauma exposure, gender diverse and transgender individuals, ethno-racial minorities, first responders, military personnel, veterans, and victims of chronic sexual abuse have a disproportionately higher risk of developing PTSD. However, these diverse populations are historically underrepresented in clinical trials. Here, we report the results of MAP2, the second confirmatory phase 3 study that extends the findings of MAP1 in an ethno-racially diverse population with moderate to severe PTSD. So yeah, in addition to expanding sort of like the scope, before it was looking at severe PTSD, now you're including moderate to severe and a more diverse, patient population. And Tegma, welcome. Shout out to Tegma, fellow fitness streamer. Hope you're doing well. Great to see you. Thank you so much for passing by. We're going over some MDMA research. So, participants were recruited from 21 August 2020 to 18 May 2022. Overall, 324 individuals were screened, 121 were enrolled. They excluded, well, it's probably better, actually, if I just go through this flowchart of, so, no surprise. When it comes to clinical trials, there's a recruitment and screening process, and, they don't just take anybody. They have, eligibility / recruitment criteria. And as frustrating as it might be, they have these criteria for a reason, because, they're trying to control for things. And they're trying to, meet certain kind of like thresholds of like they have enough statistical power. They're trying to control for confounding, variables, etc., etc. So they start off with 324 screened participants, and then 203 participants excluded, probably for a variety of reasons. And I know definitely like one of the reasons, I believe, like we're looking at a patient population with, moderate to severe PTSD. And so there's potential risk of, suicidal ideation or, suicidality. And I believe that is like one of their exclusion criteria because, when it comes to psychedelic research or when it comes to just looking at therapies in treating mental illnesses, there's the potential of like you might make a situation worse. Okay. Obviously, they're not intending to do that, but it is the possibility that, despite your intention to hopefully this is an actual treatment that improves things, this might actually be something that makes things worse. So they want to kind of like make sure that if in fact they make things worse, uh, doesn't result in the actual, the worst outcome. So that's why they tend to have pretty strict inclusion criteria. So 104 participants had enrolled, confirmed, completing, and there's also, the issue of like this is a study over time, and the participants have to come in, and they have to, take the MDMA. This is MDMA-assisted therapy. So as we will see, we're going to go over a little bit of the methodology, because I think it's super cool. These are therapy sessions that include MDMA, and these appear to be pretty intensive therapy sessions, where like they're going in and like they're taking the MDMA and they're like staying like in the therapy session for like 4 or 8 hours. I think in some cases like even overnight. And so like you at the very least you want to make sure that you are recruiting patients that are going to actually go up to these sessions, and that ideally they're going to actually stick with it. Don't want to have like a high dropout rate, or like after the first session, everyone just like drops out of the study. So that's why, one of the reasons why, among an infinite number of reasons, as to why there are pretty strict inclusion. So yeah, then once they have these 104 participants, split them up. You have the 53 in the MDMA-assisted therapy, and then the 51 in the they're getting placebo, but they're still getting the therapy. So pretty much overall, very similar, sort of close to identical conditions. The difference is, one arm is getting MDMA with therapy, the other arm still getting therapy, but is placebo. And then, yeah, they have multiple therapy sessions. Multiple, MDMA assisted. And then, in the end, so they started with 53, so 52 participants completed. So, one dropped out. So, as I sort of hinted at earlier, pretty low dropout rate. As opposed to in the placebo, they started off with 51, and then 43 ended up complete. 42 were included in the analysis. So that was their overall sort of workflow of the study. So baseline characteristics were generally similar between groups. Total 74 of 104 participants were assigned female, sex at birth, with a high proportion.
Welcome to Flavor Country.
Rooked and Pawn Pill, thank you so much for the follow. Super appreciated. Happy to have you here. Right now we're going over some MDMA research. And then with a high proportion of the placebo group, with therapy group, blah, blah, blah. Yes, probably just better to go over the demographics. So, yeah, the mean age was, 38 to 40. Overall, largely assigned female at birth. And then, yeah, here is where there's some slight differences, intentional differences in comparison to the past study. Basically, more racially and ethnically diverse patient population. So 35 of 104 participants identified their race as other than white, and 28 out of 104 identified their ethnicity as Hispanic/Latino. So what were the primary outcomes? Take me for major depressive disorder. So that doesn't, I was literally covering this briefly. I wouldn't say covering, but I've definitely sort of alluded to the fact that, yeah, ketamine definitely appears to be really promising when it comes to major depressive disorder, and especially when it comes to treatment-resistant depression. That doesn't surprise me, and I'm super glad to hear that it's been life-changing. And that, I sort of covered a little bit very briefly, just speaking to the fact that in comparison to like the best treatment that we have for treatment-resistant depression, which is electroconvulsive therapy, or quote-unquote shock therapy, ketamine appears to be pretty much like up there or like equivalent to that. And there's a recent study that I'm trying to get, but it's unfortunately behind a paywall, and my institution doesn't subscribe to that journal. Where a study published I think 4 or 5 months ago, pretty much doing that comparison, similar to this, but I think in a more rigorous way, of ketamine versus electroconvulsive therapy. And I believe the overall findings at ketamine pretty much just as good as the electroconvulsive therapy. So, the primary outcomes. MDMA-assisted therapy significantly attenuated PTSD symptomology versus placebo with therapy, as measured by a reduction in CAPS-5 total severity score from baseline to. So yeah, this is essentially just, not just, but I believe is a patient survey, or like the therapist or counselor is, assessing the symptomology of the patient. So, they assess more or less the symptomology at the baseline, and then after the 18 weeks, they assess it again, and you're seeing, I believe there's a figure associated with it. Yes, pretty much, yeah, here, this CAPS-5. So, the blue circles, that's the placebo group, still getting therapy, and then the red triangles, the MDMA-assisted therapy. And, pretty much, the lower number, the better, as in, we're measuring symptomology. And so, presumably, a lower score means a lower symptomology, and thus, the patient's getting better. And you see from the baseline at the beginning, you have sessions 1, so the therapy sessions with MDMA, session 2, session 3, and you see that the MDMA pretty much gets lower in comparison to placebo with therapy. And this is statistically significant. Or rather, P less than 0.001 with a Cohen's d. Absolutely. Pretty moderately to high effect size. So, So the secondary outcomes. MDMA-assisted therapy significantly mitigated clinician-rated functional impairment, as measured by a reduction in the Sheehan Disability Scale from baseline. I assume this is probably other one, this SDF. That disability scale. What did they do? That all the rest is just stats. But yeah, pretty much the overall same trend when comparing with CAPS-5, where the red triangles with the MDMA-assisted therapy, pretty much after the sessions, this gets lower and lower. And then, statistically, actually, maybe not. So, in the MDMA-AT group, 45 of 52 participants were responders with a clinically meaningful improvement at 18 weeks after baseline, defined as a greater than or equal to 10-point reduction in CAPS-5 total severity score, versus 29 of 42 in the placebo with therapy group, figure 3. So, the MDMA-assisted therapy definitely more effective overall in comparison to the placebo, but still getting, I would say, in my non-professional opinion, still a pretty significant effect in the placebo group, as in, the downward trend, they're both improving. It's just that the MDMA-assisted therapy is improving better. So this, as they're going to speak about, the therapy itself may also just be effective, and that the MDMA is kind of like basically potentially enhancing the therapy experience, or making therapy experience more effective. Maybe like a synergistic or enhancement effect. So almost a testament to potentially how effective therapy alone can be. So by study end, 37 of 52 participants in the MDMA-assisted therapy group no longer met DSM-5 criteria for PTSD, versus 20 of 42 participants in the placebo with therapy group. Furthermore, 24 of 52 participants in the MDMA-assisted therapy group and 9 of 42 participants in the placebo group with therapy group met remission criteria. So, yeah, with the MDMA, there's a proportion of people that are basically losing their diagnosis, so to speak. As they explicitly say, they don't meet the DSM-5 criteria. As in like 71.2%, which is a pretty high proportion of patients. But even in the placebo group, you'll see this phenomenon, but it's about 20, 23, 24% lower. So again, maybe also a testament to how effective therapy alone can be. And they say figure 3, which would be this one. Yeah, I think this figure sums it up pretty nicely, color-coded. So you have the sessions, and on the left in blue, that's with the therapy, the placebo with therapy, with the MDMA. On the right in red. And they're going session by session. And pretty much you have the non-responders in gray, all of them. And then you have loss of diagnosis and remission. And pretty much in the placebo group, as you progress, as you go from session 1 to 2 to 3, the number of people in remission, so the dark blue, goes up. And then, but also in comparison to the dark red remission with the MDMA, it's just a much larger increase. Pretty much their moderate to severe PTSD is in remission. And then, this loss of diagnosis in the, somewhat lighter than dark blue, intermediate blue, I guess. That is also just increasing from session 1 to 3. Going from a 22, ending up at 47.6, as opposed to with the MDMA, start off at 39.6, and then 60.4, and then 71. So, I'm curious to know, obviously, I don't know the entire history of MDMA research, but it might be a valid question of what happens if you extend it to 4 and 5 sessions. Where can you actually max out? Because at least from these results, there appears to be kind of, you can think of it as a dose-response relationship. As they do more and more sessions with either placebo or MDMA, they appear to be getting better over time, or just more and more people responding, more and more people getting into remission or losing their diagnosis. I'm curious, if there's any further effects if you go to 4, 5, 6 sessions. Where does it actually level off of hey, maximize the amount of people that we can get into the category of loss of diagnosis versus remission? That's probably an outstanding question. The research. Covariate analyses demonstrated similar responses to treatment regardless of disease severity, risk of hazardous alcohol or substance use disorder, severe adverse childhood experiences, or dissociative subtype PTSD. The only measured exploratory covariate with a significant interaction with treatment was lifetime history of SSRI use, was associated with improved efficacy of MDMA-assisted. Not super critical. A blinding survey. Oh yeah, so I think here is where they asked the participants in either arm, placebo or MDMA, what do you think that you received? As we'll see, some people in the placebo group get it wrong, and they think that they got MDMA. And then there's a small number in the MDMA group that think they got placebo. So a blinding survey conducted at study termination showed that 33 of 44 participants in the placebo with therapy group were certain or thought they received placebo. So 75% got it right. Whereas 9 of 44 participants inaccurately thought that they received MDMA. And 2 of 44 participants could not tell. Oh, that's super interesting. Where, yeah, you have pretty much 1 in 5 pretty much thinking they got MDMA when they didn't. And then, no surprise. In the MDMA assisted therapy group, 49 of 52, so the vast majority of participants were certain or thought that they received MDMA. So yeah, no surprise, much greater confidence. Probably most people that take a psychedelic will know that they've taken a psychedelic. But interestingly, there's like 1 of 52 participants inaccurately thought that they received placebo. And 2 of 52 participants could not tell. So I think that's super interesting. And Desolate Mirror, welcome. Great to see you. As always, hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for passing by. So when asked for the reason for their belief in treatment assignment, most participants in the MDMA-assisted therapy group reported attributing their response on the blinding survey to experiencing positive mental or emotional effect, positive physical effect. Whereas most of the participants in the placebo with therapy group reported experiencing no effect. Okay, so yeah, I think that mostly intuitively makes sense. But yeah, super interesting that one person they got it wrong, thinking that they received placebo when in fact they got MDMA. And then yeah, 2 of them pretty much had no idea what's going on there. And this might come down to, I'm speculating. I have no idea whether this actually will turn out to be true. But this might come down to metabolism. There might be a small subset of people that don't metabolize MDMA all that well, or maybe at all. This is totally a thing when it comes to other therapies or drugs, or pretty much like any substance. Like how you metabolize it, well, pretty much can be unique to you. Or there might be a small subset of people that just don't metabolize it well. I know this from opioids. Even I just covered it when it comes to caffeine. Maybe there's a small subset of people that metabolize MDMA poorly. Did they ask some? I believe that they. So I think one of the inclusion criteria. We'll get to it probably a little bit later. But I believe one of the inclusion criteria is basically not taking it regularly. I believe they pretty much assess what is their history of MDMA use before this, or psychedelic use before this study, because I believe that's part of like their recruitment process. I believe they don't want someone who's already taking a bunch of recreational MDMA. Interesting. From what I understand, hallucinating on cannabis is pretty rare, but it is totally psychoactive compound. So, safety. Most participants experienced at least one treatment-emergent adverse event during the study. 7 experienced a severe treatment-emergent adverse event, but none had a serious treatment-emergent adverse event. 2 participants in the placebo with therapy group discontinued treatment due to treatment-emergent adverse events, blah, blah, blah. But basically, in the MDMA group versus the placebo group, so you have, included muscle tightness, nausea, decreased appetite, and hyperhidrosis, which I believe is excess sweating, if I remember correctly. But just to make sure. Yeah, excess weight. I think that's pretty mild side effect. And as they say, these were mostly transient and of mild or moderate severity. So basically, no major severe side effects. At least one treatment emergent adverse event of special interest occurred in 6 of 53 participants in the MDMA assisted therapy group, and 3 of 51 participants. Blah blah blah. To yeah, overall, pretty much the main message is like pretty much well tolerated by the majority of patients, and that pretty much most side effects are mild to moderate, and uh, no uh, no permanent damage or anything like that. Let's see. Transient increases in heart rate and blood pressure were expected and were observed during experimental sessions in a dose-dependent manner. Yeah, not really surprising either. Greater fluctuations in blood pressure were seen during experimental sessions 2 and 3 in the participants treated with MDMA, most likely due to the higher doses of MDMA administered. These transient elevations did not require clinical intervention, including among the subset of participants with well-controlled hypertension, because the current dosing regimen involves administering a single split drug dose under observation for a limited number of times, each after a lengthy washout. Cardiovascular risk is likely to have been sufficiently mitigated by the study procedures and screening measures. Let's see. Here, I think they get into some of the rarer uh, side effects that may be on the more severe side. Psychiatric treatment emergent adverse events occurred at a similarly high frequency in both groups. Placebo with therapy, with suicidal ideation, insomnia, and anxiety reported most frequently. Psychiatric treatment emergent adverse events were mostly mild to moderate. 3 severe events occurred in MDMA assisted therapy group. So there's dissociation, flashback, and grief reaction. These are some of the severe events. And then 2 in the placebo group, agitation and but no severe adverse events of suicidal ideation or behavior were reported. That is, reassuring. Well, yeah, reassuring to read, and reassuring, for the future of the research. Where again, there's an understandable concern that you can make a situation worse, and you're arguably dealing with a very specific patient population where you can totally make a situation worse and have a really bad outcome. 2 participants in the MDMA assisted therapy group had suicidality, treatment emergent adverse events, ideation, of suicide ideation, one of whom engaged in non-suicidal self-injurious behavior. 2 participants in the therapy group had suicidality. 1 engaged in non-suicidal. So yeah, 1 had suicide ideation and trichotillomania. Okay. So yeah, there is this concern of making suicidal ideation or suicidality, but it seems to be pretty minor. Still something to keep track of, but basically not negligible. More than 80% of participants had a lifetime history of suicidal ideation. 13 of 53 in the MDMA assisted therapy group, and 12 of 51 in the placebo with therapy group reported suicidal ideation during the final preparation session. The number of participants reporting positive suicidal ideation varied throughout the study, but collectively never exceeded baseline values in either group. So yeah, it doesn't seem like they're making it worse, as they explicitly say. Never exceeded baseline values. 3 participants had treatment emergent active suicidal ideation with at least some intent to act, which was observed on 5 occasions. Of these, 1 participant in the MDMA assisted therapy group with no suicide ideation at baseline had the emergence of active suicide ideation with at least some intent to act. Okay, so yeah, rare, but pretty much, yeah, not negligible. Good thing that they're tracking this. So, overall, what are the summary of their findings? In this confirmatory phase 3 study of participants with moderate to severe PTSD, MDMA assisted therapy significantly improved PTSD symptoms and functional impairment as assessed by CAPS-5, SDS, respectively, compared to placebo with therapy over 18 weeks. Notably, 45 of 52 participants treated with MDMA assisted therapy achieved a clinically meaningful benefit, and 37 of 52 participants no longer met criteria for PTSD by study end. So, yeah, 71% no longer met the criteria for PTSD, and I would say pretty short uh, study time. 18 weeks, that's, 4.5 months. So, in my non-expert opinion, pretty dramatic effects in a short amount of time. And again, what I understand, and as they describe it, this is a difficult to treat patient population where the gold standard treatment is not all that effective, or rather, a significant portion of the patients don't respond to the gold standard treatment. In a historic first, to our knowledge, for psychedelic treatment studies, participants who identified as ethnically or racially diverse encompassed approximately half of the study sample. These findings confirm and extend the results observed in MAP 1, with general consistency across endpoints. I believe MAP 1 study that they're referring to. Again, it seems like it's overall the same research group. Given the diverse population and degree of participant complexity, the replication of efficacy is particularly notable. In our study, 26.9% of participants expressed moderate PTSD, whereas in MAP 1, all participants expressed severe PTSD. Yeah, again, we're pretty highly confident this is the MAP 1, and this was only severe PTSD. As opposed to this one, both moderate and severe. A substantial proportion of participants displayed comorbid features associated with high treatment resistance, such as major depression, multiple sources of trauma, including childhood and combat trauma, and dissociative subtype PTSD. In keeping with MAP 1, treatment was not significantly affected by disease severity. Risk of hazardous alcohol or substance use disorder, severe adverse childhood experiences, or dissociative subtype. And what's interesting here, as they allude to, of like basically hazardous alcohol consumption. I think they kind of hinted at it later, of like, sort of put it crudely, you might be killing two birds with one stone, maybe, because I believe MDMA, if I remember correctly, is also being explored for treatment of alcohol use disorder, if I remember. Yeah, I covered this before, where in patients with alcohol use disorder. Yeah, I remember covering this study when I did an in-depth stream devoted to some of the MDMA research. I think a little over a year. So yeah, given the fact that there's this comorbid aspect in PTSD where, unfortunately but understandably, PTSD patients will have comorbidities such as substance use disorder or alcohol use disorder, and maybe, the MDMA, might have this dual effect of like maybe potentially treating both the PTSD and the alcohol use disorder. Although I'm sure, it's a dynamic situation. Always at some level, some proportion of patients are, using these substances to sort of manage or deal in their own way with their PTSD. Where was I? Yeah, so furthermore, there was no observed site-to-site variability and no differential effect if participants stayed overnight after the experimental session. However, lifetime history of SSRIs, female sex assigned at birth, and BDI-2 score greater than or equal to 23 at baseline were associated with positive impacts on outcomes and may warrant further study based on the exploratory nature of these. So they're uh, basically trying to hone in on like what are the demographics of the individuals, or I guess the patients that appear to respond the best. And it seems like these are some of the variables. You have a lifetime history of SSRIs. If you're female, sex assigned at birth, and have basically score something on a patient survey, on this particular patient survey, you're more likely have basically a positive outcome, or to like have a positive response to the treatment. MDMA simultaneously induces pro-social feelings and softens responses to emotionally challenging, fearful states, potentially enhancing the ability of individuals with PTSD to benefit from psychotherapy by reducing sensations of fear, threat, and negative emotionality. The low dropout rate for MDMA-assisted therapy has been replicated across 7 studies, suggesting that MDMA induces a true shift in participant engagement. And as I think I highlighted earlier, and as they're highlighting here, the low dropout rate. I think like only one patient in the MDMA group dropped out. They started with like 53, and they ended up with like 52. Yeah, 53 and 52. Just like one dropout, as opposed to like 7 or 8 dropped out in the. So here. So the low dropout rate, in contrast, a recent study comparing psychotherapies in veterans with PTSD reported dropout rates of 55.8% and 46.6% for prolonged exposure and cognitive processing therapy, respectively. The MAP2 dropout rate was 1.9% in MDMA assisted therapy group and 15.7% in the placebo with therapy group. Yeah, as again highlighted. Way higher dropout rate. Pretty much like 7 or 8-fold higher dropout rate comparison in comparing the MDMA versus placebo. The high proportion of dropouts in the placebo with therapy group relative to MDMA could be attributed to participants receiving less effective treatment and to disappointment from ineffective therapeutic blinding. Although blinding survey data showed that not all participants correctly identified the treatment that they received. Right. So that's a little bit tricky. At least I think so. Where, you have this high dropout rate in the placebo group. And as they kind of allude to, that may just be due to the fact that some of these patients might just clue into the fact that they are not getting the MDMA. How can you do a true blinding in psychedelic research? But as they sort of highlight, some of the patients get it wrong, where they're in the placebo group and they're thinking that they got MDMA, and even a small number, I think only 1 or 2, where they're getting MDMA and they think they're getting placebo, or like they can't really tell what it is that they're getting. So what exactly is leading to the much higher dropout rate in the placebo group? I guess still an open question, but it's probably this aspect of not really being able to truly blind the experiment, probably part of it. Consistent with MAP1, no new major safety issues were reported. Common treatment emergent adverse events were similar to previous studies and consistent with expected effects of MDMA. Rates of cardiac treatment emergent adverse events were low, and increases in blood pressure and pulse were mild and consistent with MDMA's sympathomimetic effects. Consistent with PTSD, suicidal ideation was observed in both groups. MDMA did not appear to increase this risk, and no suicidal behavior was observed. CSSRS scores varied throughout the study, but never exceeded baseline values for either group. Notably, there were 5 total events of treatment emergent CSSRS scores, 4 or 5, 3 in the MDMA group, and 2 in the placebo with therapy group. MAP2 enrolled participants with a history of suicidality, but excluded those with a current, serious, imminent suicide risk. Yeah, again, that makes total sense. Again, I think that risk of making a situation worse is just like way too high. So understandably, you'd want to screen out anyone with this serious, imminent suicide risk. Thus, special attention to this vulnerable population is warranted in future studies. But yeah, it is a valid question of like, does MDMA have therapeutic potential in that high risk, vulnerable population? You know, that's where it's like super tricky. Like, you would want to research these individuals, but then that is like very risky research to carry out, because again, you might make it worse. You definitely would not want to include someone in a study, or at least, yeah, a very difficult ethical question to answer. Of like, if this person's at serious risk, or serious imminent risk side, you know, can you enroll them in a study for a psychedelic where that might just be the one thing that, you know, pushes them over the line. In alignment with Map 1, there were no reports of problematic MDMA abuse or dependence, including in participants with histories of or current alcohol and substance. However, it is important to note that participants with any substance use disorder other than cannabis or alcohol in the 12 months before enrollment were excluded from Map 2, as were participants with severe or moderate in early remission alcohol or cannabis use disorder. Right, so I think you highlighted earlier, or what's highlighted earlier, yeah, by Rooked and Ponfield, like if they asked if they used MDMA before, it looks like they did, and they kind of tried to assess what is their history of substance use and or abuse. And they mentioned alcohol, and I think cannabis. Well, yeah, cannabis. And I also have to assume, yeah, no reports of problematic MDMA abuse or dependence. I think they're really asking the patients of their history of MDMA. However, exploratory findings from the MAP1 Phase 3 trial indicated that MDMA-assisted therapy was actually associated with a significantly greater reduction in mean alcohol use disorder identification test change scores compared to placebo with therapy, suggesting that the effects of MDMA-assisted therapy on hazardous alcohol use secondary to PTSD should be further studied. Long-term data are also needed to assess the risk of MDMA abuse or misuse after study participation. So, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it definitely appears to be and the case report, but I believe there are larger studies looking at whether MDMA has a place in treating alcohol use disorder, because it seems like there might be some therapeutic potential there. And it seems like this is also hinting at that, because, yeah, there was this greater reduction in mean alcohol use disorder identification test. As in, it looks like, you know, yeah, basically, in addition to their PTSD getting better, their relationship to alcohol is, like, just getting better. Microdosing or using MDMA. So, that's an excellent question. So, this is the next study that we're going to go over. So it's a totally different study. And well, not to like spoil it, but here we're wrapping up the overall findings. Where here there appears to be a pretty significant therapeutic effect of like MDMA when looking at moderate to severe PTSD. MDMA with therapy appears to really be beneficial for these patients, as opposed to, as we will see, when it comes to microdosing with psilocybin, you know, spoiler alert, doesn't seem like there's any real benefit whatsoever. But if you're talking about the subjective experiences, well, from what I understand, microdosing, I don't think microdosing really does anything, at least so far, based off some of the research, or at least the research is mixed. Oh, and Socrates, welcome. Great to see you. Hope you're doing well. I was I caught the tail end of your stream yesterday. I think with, or rather, I was lurking, in the tail end of your stream, yesterday. I think with the Jumbo Jack, and yeah, the vaccines and all that stuff. I wanted to jump in, but I didn't want to open the can of worms. And also, shout out to you. Whoopsies. And yes, I totally made you. I should have made you VIP way earlier. But yeah, if you're not following Socrates, you absolutely should. A scientist, PhD scientist, in biology or computational biology, better, more accurate way to put it. Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, they were interesting. I definitely had things to say, but like, there's a time and place. And also, pick your battles. At least that's my approach. And that's not a battle that I wanted to pick at the time. I was mostly like entertained. And in my opinion, take it for what it's worth, which might be nothing. I think you handled it well, and I think your advice, or rather your perspective, I think hopefully made them realize that maybe their approach might be less than ideal. And it's a little bit interesting, as I think you highlighted correctly, that, they were looking for nuance, but then they're making like these blanket statements, using the word they, the powers that be. Well, how much nuance are you looking for if you're just like making these broad statements about the powers that be? That doesn't scream nuance to me, but like, what do I know? But we're just wrapping up this study here on MDMA. This randomized controlled trial. Well, macrodosing. Definitely, I will be covering future studies on macrodosing with psilocybin. I have been meaning to cover psilocybin research. I believe I've done LSD, and I definitely have done MDMA. I think, and I've done ketamine, but I have not done psilocybin yet. But I probably should do that. Taking full dose can be an enjoyable and interesting experience, but for God's sake, introspect, meditate, spend some time with yourself, exploring your own mind before you jump. Yeah, and here is where I think people overlook. So, this is MDMA assisted therapy, okay? And we're gonna get a little bit in the methodology, or like what the sessions actually look like, because I think people are quick. At the end of the day, we're all trying to do the best that we can. If something helps you, then it helps you. Do whatever you want that you think is beneficial to you. Someone with a chronic illness, just go with what you think works. But also at the end of the day, hopefully at some point you can either consult with a medical professional, or if you want to consult the research, do that. But I think people often overlook that, at least when it comes to like this particular study, like they're not taking MDMA alone. This is MDMA assisted therapy. And as we just went through, the placebo group with the therapy, there was still a benefit. Just that the MDMA group, you had this much greater benefit. Okay? So it's not like it's highlighted nicely here, where placebo with MDMA, they're both improving over time. It's just like the MDMA is better. Okay? And so it's like, this is not an excuse to just go and take MDMA thinking that you're going to achieve any sort of meaningful beneficial effect, because here it's MDMA assisted therapy, and the therapy sessions, there are multiple therapy sessions, at least 3, and they're pretty intensive. Like, as we'll see, I think these are like 6 to 8 hour sessions for each session. So it's like 20 hours in total of therapy sessions. So I just want people to hopefully understand that. But yeah, I also recognize that at the end of the day, feel something that helps you. Go with that. But yeah, there's nuance to the conversation when it comes. I think many people are just quick to latch on to promising research of psychedelics to justify any psychedelic use. And I don't think that's a good thing, personally. And yeah, totally, there absolutely is some research. That's why I said the research appears to be mixed. Where there appears to be some research showing that there is benefits to microdosing, but then there's other research, like the one we're going to cover in a bit, where it seems, and this is a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, and it was published quite recently in the last year. Yeah, August 2022, year old. So this is not like some outdated research. And this is something that they talk about, where it's like microdosing popularity. So let's test it and see if there's any benefit. At least here in this study, there doesn't appear to be that much benefit. But there's other research showing that there may be some benefit. That's why, like, the jury's still out. I would never say, okay, that based off of this one study, that means, you know, microdosing does not work. Just going to highlight that based off of this one study, but there's other studies in the past, and maybe there will be future studies that show that microdosing has some sort of therapeutic benefit. And, you know, this might just be a poorly designed study, or like maybe it's a dosing issue. You know, maybe too much of a microdose. I don't know if microdosing is like strictly defined. Let's see. I really tried with that chatter. I went back and did some research after because it's been so long. I forgot a lot of the main rationales for it. Yeah, totally. Well, you know. They might be, that chatter might have been living in the past a little bit, you know, still relevant and still good to talk about and still good to like do a retrospective, you know, moving forward of like, you know, what do we do if we encounter a similar situation? But I think they might be too hung up on something, maybe. It would be pretty interesting to try actual MDMA rather than 2% MDMA plus caffeine plus speed plus yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's why, you know, hopefully we can get to the place of, you know, pharmaceutical grade MDMA. And I'm going to get to it a little bit in the methodology. But I believe most in the psychedelic research, like they have a chemist make the MDMA. Participants. Usually there's a section. Either way, we'll get to that. Wrapping up. Let me just catch it. I suppose it depends on who will profit from said. Well, like I understand the concern and totally, you know, their poor quality research takes place and conflicts of interest are absolutely a thing. But let's don't be so quick to dismiss any research that, you know, doesn't look positive and just attribute it to, well, since there's no profit. You know, this is MDMA research, okay? And you know, I don't think, as far as I know, there's not like some big MDMA group, but they're still finding positive results. Was I? And yes. So, however, exploratory findings from the MAP1 phase 3 trial indicated that MDMA-assisted therapy was actually... So, oh yeah, I already read that. So yeah, this dual aspect. MDMA, not only are they finding effective for PTSD, maybe also potentially beneficial for alcohol use disorder. Although the sample sizes of the MAP1 and MAP2 phase 3 studies had 90% statistical power and were developed with guidance from the FDA to ensure adequate, rigorous testing of outcomes, these evaluations did not extend further than 2 months after therapy and were intended to support an acute treatment course. To support these studies, data from the ongoing follow-up of participants from phase 2 and 3 studies will be important for further assessment of the long-term effectiveness of MDMA-assisted therapy in participants with PTSD. It is of interest to note that pooled phase 2 analyses of participants with at least 12 months of follow-up and their final MDMA-assisted therapy session have shown that least squares mean CAPS-4 scores continue to improve between the final session and follow-up. So, pretty much saying that, the study lasted 18 weeks. You have these, 3 sessions, okay? But then they do a follow-up, and you see in both groups, but much better in the MDMA group, where, there's greater benefit in the MDMA group in comparison to placebo after 3 sessions. But then they do a follow-up, and follow-up even more after that, and it seems like, there's further improvements that take place. So again, I'm curious, if you can find, basically, if you can get even more beneficial effects, extending this out to, 4, 5, 6 sessions, where I'm curious as to where it plateaus off, or does it actually plateau off? Because, again, as I highlighted, as you compare, session after session, more and more patients are responding. Pretty much looking at this MDMA, the non-responders are in gray. Okay, so you start off with about half as non-responders, and then after session 2, 22.6%, and then after session 3, 13.5%. So, can you get this down like close to 0 after like 4 or 5 sessions? Which, I don't think that's like a huge increase. The intensity of the treatment, I don't think. But definitely not an expert. Oh, and Orange You, welcome. Great to see you. Hope you're doing well. And I should say, I guess, good morning to you. And hope your weekend is off to a good start. What? Yes, absolutely, it is impressive. And again, this is looking at a pretty difficult to treat patient population with moderate to severe PTSD. So, cleaned out the shed. Ooh. Yeah, that doesn't sound all too pleasant, but good on you for doing the difficult work. And well, happy birthday to your daughter, and I hope it's a wonderful. Several limitations may impact the integration of MDMA-assisted therapy into clinical care, including the exclusion of participants with high suicide risk, comorbid personality disorders, and underlying cardiovascular disease. Observed effect sizes for MDMA-assisted therapy were similar to MAP1, this previous study that I'm going back to over and over. And although higher than those observed in SSRI studies, ranging from 0.09 to 0.56 versus placebo for sertraline and paroxetine, the superiority of MDMA-assisted therapy over SSRIs cannot be assumed without a direct comparison. So yeah, even though, based off of the numbers they're getting here, it looks like the MDMA is better than the SSRIs, can't really come to that conclusion with any sort of confidence unless you actually do the head-to-head, trial or experiment. So the complex relationship between SSRI use, history, and MDMA-assisted therapy treatment efficacy was beyond the scope of the current statistical analysis and sample size, but will be important to consider in future studies. In addition, further study of MDMA with other forms of psychotherapy for PTSD should be. The notable effects seen in the placebo with therapy arm could suggest that the standalone value of the manualized inner-directed therapy that was developed for use with MDMA. Additional head-to-head studies need to be conducted to evaluate whether this form of manualized therapy provides greater value in the treatment of PTSD than the current first-line cognitive behavioral therapy and prolonged exposure therapy treatments. But no, I'm hoping that remains to be the case. I hope your shed and your house and your life remains snake-free, unless you actually want them to be filled with snakes. Well, So there are totally good reasons. Well, first of all, not every single scientist is looking to maximize their profits. And there are totally many studies that happen where there's no profit to be made. Now, there's not enough of those studies, but I can bring up many studies where there's literally no profit to be made, but they want to know whether it's effective or not. You can find one probably pretty quickly. Yes, found one. Oopsies. Many tabs. Okay. You know, no surprise. I use my own condition because like that's what I know the most. So this is a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial of metronidazole. Metronidazole is an antibiotic, also known as Flagyl. Okay, and this antibiotic has been around for a long time. Like, there's no patent on it. It's like a gold standard sort of antibiotic used for a lot of things. And so the history goes back. Began to be commercially used in 1960 in France. Okay, it's on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. It's a commonly prescribed medication in the United States, more than 2 million prescriptions. It has a whole host of uses, but it's also used for treatment or management of my own condition. And this is a study. There's no profit to be made. There's no patent on metronidazole. The patent ran out like decades ago. This is a really old antibiotic. And it takes like whatever pennies to manufacture. But this is research that is still funded. And funded, back in 1991. And again, patent, this is a generic drug with no profits to be made. And yet this randomized controlled trial still, took place. Profit can explain a lot, but it doesn't explain everything. It's not always about who stands to profit. Totally, it happens way more often than it should, but it totally happens. Research does occur where there's no profit to be made, and we just want to answer basic medical or scientific questions, like this research here. They genuinely just want to know whether this is actually effective. You can't make money off of this, or you're not going to make any sort of real money off of this. There's no patent on this. Yes, they are generics. But who you think someone's going to make profits off of metronidazole? This is not funded by any sort of pharmaceutical company at all. Just like this should be publicly funded research. Let me just make sure. Which platform is going to pay scientists to advertise products for them? Doesn't quite work like that exactly. This sort of happens, but it's not like the way you're outlining it. I would say is not the most accurate framing. There must be a whole bunch of molecules that do interesting stuff to the brain. Are they able to design chemicals from scratch based on neuron interactions? Ooh. Okay. Simulations, I don't know, but we appear to be moving closer and closer to more or less, I mean, I'm gonna cover it pretty soon. Find sort of an example. Um, and I should probably search. So, we are sort of moving in the direction of, let's say, using maybe not simulations, but AI and deep learning and machine learning to make predictions, and in drug design. And this is a study that I'm going to cover at some point, of like this guided discovery, as they say. And so I don't know if something exactly like this is playing out now. I would say probably yes to some level. But I don't know exactly for sure. I'd have to do some digging, but it wouldn't surprise me if there are studies that are like looking exactly what you're asking. But yeah, wrap up. Overall study. Oh yeah, it's not an interruption. Yeah, I totally have I have folders. I have tags, etc., etc. Although I do want to move away from Mendeley. Oh yes, I've totally brought up AlphaFold for sure. This study, and I have other studies, definitely very quite familiar. AlphaFold, and a lot of cool research taking place. AlphaFold, and I'm certainly going to do a stream in the near future devoted to like AlphaFold and like well, pretty much protein folding and biochemistry and how AlphaFold is basically arguably revolutionizing protein structure and determination, or protein structure determination. So, yeah, wrapping up, the notable effects seen in the placebo with therapy arm could suggest the standalone value of the manualized inner-directed therapy that was developed for use with MDMA. Additional head-to-head studies will need to be conducted to evaluate whether this form manualized therapy. Yeah, I think I already read this, but pretty much saying that, again, you still see positive effects in the placebo group, highlighting the fact that therapy alone, there's absolutely some benefits to that. Although treatment expectancy per se was not measured in this study, prospective treatment expectancy would likely have been high in both study arms, with random assignment expected to distribute this equally between. Although expectancy effects are a well-known issue, psychiatric clinical trials and are intertwined with the observation of treatment benefit during a trial, several observations support expectancy mitigation in the current study. 1. The groups did not separate after the first experimental session. 2. Placebo with therapy dropouts did not uniformly occur after the first experimental session. 3. Blinding survey data showed that not all participants correctly identified the treatment that they the therapists who participated in this study were required to complete the sponsor's training program to ensure consistent clinical practice and to mitigate harm may be of benefit for prescribers, complete additional training and continuing education if MDMA-assisted therapy is approved for use by a regulatory agency. And so lastly, our concluding paragraph, this confirmatory phase 3 trial showed consistent benefits of MDMA-assisted therapy in an ethno-racially diverse group of individuals with long-standing moderate to severe PTSD and numerous comorbidities. The dropout rate was low, and treatment was generally well tolerated. These findings represent the culmination of over 2 decades of research and together with map 1, indicate that further consideration of this treatment in individuals with moderate to severe PTSD is warranted. So yeah, that wraps it up nicely. Make sure that I caught everything in chat. Few things. So interesting looking into the idea because they basically all hate Sam Harris now because, yeah, exactly. Yeah, going back to, well, yeah, that Chris Williams podcast, are pretty much, yeah, with Brett Weinstein, Eric Weinstein, etc., etc. I think Sam Harris has really, whatever, divorced himself from, intellectual dark web, whatever that means. Ooh, thank you so much for the link. Super. Okay, yeah, this is pretty much, yeah, we'll write out my. So, wrap up this study just looking a little bit at the methodology, or pretty much like what the sessions look like, what the actual, therapy looked like, and the administration of MDMA. I think it's important. Oh, and Slightly Caffeinated, welcome. Great to see you, and shout out to Slightly Caffeinated. I think my I think my shoutouts on cooldown. I'd have to do with the old Streamlabs way. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, if you're not following Slightly Caffeinated, you absolutely should be. They're a scientist, a biologist, and they do science chats and they do gaming, and they make coffee live on stream. And I actually, it's funny because I've been sharing recently that I'm actually caffeine free for 11 days now, because I think I had a suspicion that caffeine was affecting my sleep, even though I was consuming it only in the morning. And yeah, the stream is going great because I think this is a great paper. We're covering this MDMA assisted therapy paper, and then we're going to dive into this microdosing psilocybin paper. And yeah, I'm sad to report that I'm not caffeinated. And totally when I wake up every morning, like the temptation is there. And yeah, the first week like was rough. As I mentioned, I had like a low grade headache for like 4 or 5 days. And obviously lack of energy and lethargic. And slowly things got better, and my sleep is slowly improving. Like, there's definitely a part of me that wants to return to caffeine, for obvious reasons. But then it's like, I don't know. I might just be too caffeine sensitive. Or maybe I'm just a big baby. Who knows? Or all of the above. But yeah. I think this is like the longest that I've been without caffeine for probably like years. I can't remember the last time I had a break from caffeine. And yeah, it's a wild ride, not gonna lie. But I still, I will now consume my caffeine vicariously through watching like your streams and you making coffee. Because that's pretty much the best I can do right now. I did 30 days, yeah, so like this might just be my life now. Caffeine free. I don't know. It really depends on if I can get my sleep to a better place, and if caffeine doesn't disrupt my life or sleep further. I don't know. I did not think that caffeine was affecting my sleep that much because I only consumed it in the morning, and I didn't consume that much. I consumed, about 150 milligrams in the morning. But apparently that was enough to affect me. Or metabolize. I don't know. And yeah, the temptation, so I don't actually drink coffee, but I totally consume caffeine through other methods, through workout, etc., etc. but the temptation to consume caffeine is absolutely still there. Every morning, uh, it's totally, to be crude, drug-seeking behavior, so to speak. I wake up in the morning. So yeah, what were the MDMA sessions like, and in combination with the therapy sessions? So trial procedures were consistent with MAP 1, and again, like the MAP 1, and this is also, they had intensive assisted therapy. Uh, yeah, exactly. I might need some MDMA assisted therapy sessions, given my lack of caffeine. I don't know. It's definitely some sort of psychological effect. Enrolled participants underwent 3 90-minute preparation sessions with a 2-person therapy team. So yeah, before they actually started the therapy session, the actual treatment, there were pre-sessions, sort of preparation sessions, getting them prepared for the treatment that they're going to undergo, including at least one licensed therapist, and were then randomized 1-to-1 to receive MDMA or placebo with therapy for approximately 3 months. The treatment period consisted of 3 8-hour dosing sessions. So again, as I highlighted, these are intensive sessions, not like your standard, 1-hour therapy session. It's like they're given MDMA and they're, there in the session for 8 hours. And I think even in the past study, in this one, I think some patients, it was like an overnight thing. And I think even in this one, they highlight, I think, music. Yeah, there's some past studies where they like incorporate music and like a really soothing environment. In conjunction with therapy, spaced approximately 1 month apart. Yeah, the 8-hour therapy and dosing sessions pretty much spaced a month apart. And then therapy was conducted by trained personnel. Well, hopefully. And yeah, they have their own like sort of treatment manual and trial protocol. And yeah, here's the actual dosing sessions. During experimental sessions, and in keeping with the dosing in MAP 1, participants received a split dose of 120 to 180 milligrams of MDMA or placebo. And again, I don't know what sort of the dosages are that are, let's say, recreational, or like what's enough to induce, whatever the subjective effects of ecstasy. From what I gathered from what people shared in the chat, 250 milligrams, sort of like a standard recreational dose. This is mostly in line with that. And, arguably, for sure, way more pure, or like virtually guaranteed to be pure MDMA versus what you might get recreationally. So for the first experimental session, the initial dose of 80 milligrams was followed by a supplemental half dose of 40 milligrams. In the second and third experimental sessions, the initial dose was of 120 milligrams, followed by a supplemental half dose of 60 milligrams. The supplemental half dose was administered 1.5 to 2 hours after the initial dose. Participants in both treatment groups received identical therapy. The 120 milligram split dose was selected for the first experimental session in phase 3 trials to allow patients to acclimate to the treatment regimen using a clinical titration approach based on clinician recommendations from a phase 2 trial in veterans and first responders. So they're going by, what was used in the past and what was shown to be efficacious in the past. And they start off with a slightly lower dose and a split dose, basically, as they explicitly say, to get them acclimated, I guess, with the MDMA. Even though I'm sure there's probably a subset of patients here that have experimented with MDMA, there's probably, or almost certainly, a subset of patients that this would be their first time taking MDMA. And so, yeah, you probably don't want to overwhelm them. Especially, again, you're looking at, moderate to severe PTSD. Yeah, I don't think you want to, go from 0 to 100 fast too quick. Let's see. So during the second and third experimental sessions, doses were escalated to 180 milligrams, as this was the most frequently studied efficacious dose in phase 2 trials. This dosing regimen also provides clinicians with the option of dose adjustments if needed. And then within the MDMA assisted therapy group, 3 participants did not undergo dose escalation in experimental sessions 2 and 3. And 2 participants experienced dose administration timing errors. Each experimental session was followed by 3 90-minute integration sessions to support participants processing and understanding their experience. Full procedures, including details on therapy teams and training, are outlined in these. So yeah, again, these are, in my opinion, non-expert opinion, like these are pretty intensive like sessions. You know, it's not like they're just giving the MDMA and they like let the patients go on their way. It's like MDMA, a heavily therapy assisted sessions where it's like 8-hour dosing. And even then, they followed by 3 90-minute integration sessions. Arguably, like when they go in for like the dose and the session, seems like they're there pretty much like all day, or 10 or 12 hours. So pretty intensive, but given the fact that it's intensive, but it's also the fact that the timeline is, I would say, in my opinion, like pretty short. It's just like 3 months, 3 to 4 months, and they see this like pretty dramatic effect again, where it's like intensive sessions, but they see these dramatic effects in a pretty short amount of time. You know, whether this is an intensive intervention or like mild intervention, I can't really judge. I think it's pretty cool and pretty dramatic. And Wildcat, well, I think you changed your name. But yeah, Wildcat, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. Hope you're doing well. Great to see you. That is a fantastic question. This CAPS-5, I believe that is a patient survey, but we should go down to the methodology. So no, I actually didn't dissect the CAPS-5, but it's totally a valid question. They might describe it here. No, they just say the CAPS-5. But I believe this is a patient survey, but we should confirm that. That is totally included. So it's the CAPS-5 total severity score assessment. CAPS-5 total severity score of 11 or less and no longer meeting PTSD. So I'm uncertain whether this is a patient survey or is it the therapist or / counselor that is assessing the patient, because I know that they train the therapists and counselors in a very specific manner. Let's see. Yeah. So a central pool of blinded independent assessors was used to mitigate the risk of functional unblinding. Assessors were trained and supervised by independent consultants with expertise in PTSD, diagnostics, and the CAPS-5 to ensure inter-rater reliability and validity of assessments. So from what I'm gathering here, like these are independent consultants, or rather assessors, were I guess giving that CAPS-5 score. Doesn't seem like it's a patient survey. Each assessor conducted no more than one CAPS-5 assessment. So these are assessors doing the assessment, and the assessors were trained and supervised by independent consultants with expertise in PTSD diagnostics. It's not a patient survey. It's assessors trained by experts to rate the patients, and I guess pretty much an independent rating, so to speak. Assessors were also vetted before their onboarding to ensure that there were no conflicts of interest. Right. Okay, this is perfect. Yeah, I think it's like a subjective, clinician administered PT. Yeah, that makes total. So yeah, a scoring system. And it's like, yeah, it's not the patient doing the rating. It looks like it's the assessor, the trained assessor rating. But I think even then, they do cover symptomology as well. Like I think they do both because they mentioned that in the discussion of like, yeah, not only the CAPS-5, but also based off of the subjective experience of the patients, they also feel like they're getting better. Sure. Yes. And well, yeah, I highlighted this. So, you know, there's understandably, a lot of researchers associated or like, included in this study. And again, it's a follow-up of this one. And same first author, Jennifer M. Mitchell, and still Jennifer M. Mitchell. So like this is that map 1 study. I'm pretty sure, highly confident this is that map 1 study, and this is the map 2. And there's a lot of competing interests, but this is not to say that this means that this is bad research or like this nullifies the findings. They are just disclosing competing interest. And even then, from what I gathered, although there's a lot of them that I highlighted, I did not dissect every single competing interest. Like, there's like hundreds of them, but it seems like they're mostly like consulting and speaking fees and like getting funding and grants, etc., etc. I don't think any, and I think there's maybe like a couple of patents, but unrelated patents or nothing super related. Yeah, that's totally a fantastic sort of thing to highlight. Or rather, like, yeah, can you objectively assess PTSD symptoms? Even though they're using independent assessors that are trained by experts. So, is that objective? I personally don't know what's better. Is it better to ask the patient, or is it better to get a third party to assess how the patient is doing for them on that CAPS-5? I think that's always a tricky part when it comes to studies like these. Even then, as I highlighted earlier, even if you ask the patients themselves, okay, where was it? I highlighted that, yeah, some patients don't even know whether they're getting MDMA or not. Or like some patients can get it wrong. There were patients in the placebo group that thought they were getting MDMA, and there was like a couple of patients in the MDMA group that didn't really know whether they got MDMA, or like one of them actually thought they got placebo. So like, should you rely on the subjective experience of the patients or an independent assessment or third-party assessment? I don't actually know. But yeah, I think this sums it up nicely. Where a blinding survey conducted at study termination showed that 33 of 44 participants in the placebo with therapy group were certain or thought they received, whereas 9 of 44 participants inaccurately thought that they received MDMA. Yeah, some people get it wrong. Super interesting. What's going on there? So I think that pretty much covers entirety, not the entirety, pretty much like the majority study. I'm not going to dissect the entirety of the methodology because like the methodology of this paper. And all their statistical analysis. I just mostly wanted to highlight sort of like the therapeutic sessions. Like these are long, intensive. I'm so curious to the people who thought they got MDA, like what was their yeah. Like, I don't know. I think that's like one of the most interesting things of the study. It's like what's going on with that 8 or 9 patients where it's like I thought I was getting MDMA. And I'm curious Now, obviously, you'd have to go in and check like their individual like responses and assessment. But it's like, how did their improvement track like with the rest? Like the ones, the 8 or 9 patients that thought that they were getting MDMA, did their, CAPS-5 score more closely resemble the MDMA assisted therapy group? Uh, Obviously, they can't show that data. That's individual data, or maybe they can if they if they make it anonymous. But I think that would be a good maybe look in. Uh, so the second study that I wanted to cover, but I'm going to cover this one more briefly, just try to highlight the highlights. So we sort of spoke a little bit about microdosing, and that based off of what I've seen in the research, but I haven't done a deep dive on microdosing. I've just come across like, 3 or 4 studies that have looked at microdosing with psilocybin. This appears to be one of the more recent ones, just last year or a little over a year ago, that has looked at microdosing. That, microdosing appears to be taking off in popularity. I can only speak from my own personal experience, not for myself, but I know a couple of people in my life that they're experiencing, or rather, they're experimenting with microdosing. And based off of their subjective experience, they swear by the positive or the beneficial effects of microdosing. And thus, that's why they continue to do it. I have not. Just because, well, the small amount, not just because, but one of the reasons is like, I'm also concerned with, contamination and, making sure that I'm consuming the things that, I should be consuming. And of the 1 or 2 people that I know personally that are microdosing, like they're sort of like taking matters into their own hands and kind of like growing things and trying to control as many things as they can control. I personally would not want to like buy it from someone else. Basically, if I were actually to go down this road, I'd want to make sure that I'm actually, dosing myself with something that I intend to dose with, and not relying on, someone else who's, I myself, as like a biochemist, probably wouldn't really trust myself to either grow these things or even synthesize any sort of illicit chemical. And so I definitely wouldn't trust someone, whatever, not trained. So that's one of the reasons. And the other one is because, like, I haven't looked into it, but I don't know, like, the long-term safety profile of psilocybin. From what I understand, it's largely good, or there's no major safety concerns, and it's microdosing. And also, so of the research that I've come across, it seems to be pretty mixed. And it's one study, and it's just one study, that there doesn't appear to be a positive effect. But this is just one double-blind, not the be-all and end-all. And the case is not closed on microdosing. But this appears to be like one study that is actually trying to, assess this issue of microdosing. Because, as they say, it has gained popularity. I thought there wasn't... So yeah, from what I understand, there's not a lot of evidence for the benefits of microdosing. And again, I've only seen like 3 or 4 studies, and some studies point to some sort of beneficial effects, and then there's this one that pretty much virtually no effects. Yeah, and definitely I advocate for, at the very least, decriminalization, if not, full legalization. Or at the very least, bare minimum, like no one should be in prison for consuming any sort of substance. And yeah, that is what I understand from, again, the testimonials that I receive from the couple of people that grow their own stuff. It's like, not only is it a pain, but also I think there's like, if you don't grow it properly, if you do something wrong, it can be like potentially toxic. I don't know. Like, I'm literally going by just what I hear. I have not looked into at all as to how to grow these things. So take anything that I say about growing a massive grain of salt. I'm literally just going by, testimonials and anecdotal experience. Yeah, and I wouldn't trust them. I don't. First of all, I don't. I would probably want to start off small with just like a basic plant, because like I have actually in my lifetime have not owned any plants, so I'm not gonna go straight to growing mushrooms. I'd probably just start off with a cactus, see if I can be successful with that, and maybe start from there. Yeah, like, that seems to escalate really. Yeah, I've never owned any plant. I've never attempted to cultivate any plant, so I'm definitely not going to trust myself with like now growing. I'm going to rely on my growing abilities to consume a substance that might be toxic for me. So you gotta crawl before you can walk and run. Yeah, from what I understand, yeah, orchids I think are low maintenance. Like I definitely want to start off with. Ooh, well, kudos to you for working with plants in research. Like I love plants and trees and green spaces, but I hate studying plants, especially like plant genetics. That I can do it, but I do not enjoy plant biology or learning about plant. Okay, I am wrong. Then all the more reason to not trust myself in growing any plant. So, yeah, exactly. Plant genetics and plant biology, not a pleasant experience. I appreciate them. I respect anybody that works with plants, and I respect anybody that grows plants and can maintain, nice green space in their own home. Like, yeah, I definitely don't want. I want nothing to do with plants from a research aspect. At least not if I can help it. So, over the last decade, the use of relatively small doses of psychedelics to enhance mental function has attracted a significant amount of interest from the general public and the scientific community. The 2021 Global Drug Survey reported that 22% of those who used the most popular psychedelics in the last 12 months did so in the context of this practice, frequently known as microdosing, which I've only like briefly glanced over this study. Is microdosing even like officially defined? I guess maybe we'll find out. What actually qualifies? With approximately 4% in the total sample, and up to 17% according to an independent study. Microdosing is frequently undertaken to improve mood, cognitive function, and mental concentration, as well as to enhance creativity and problem-solving skills. Yet the effects of low doses of psilocybin or other serotonergic psychedelics have not been extensively investigated to date. However, extrapolation of some of the effects usually found for higher doses suggests that low amounts of psychedelics could modify brain oscillatory activity, perception, cognitive functions, and mood. In turn, these effects could be variable among individuals depending on traits such as suggestibility and absorption. Moreover, research suggests that full doses serotonergic psychedelics are capable of producing lasting positive changes in behavior, personality, and mental health. I feel like there's a word missing here, but whatever. Maybe I just have poor reading. At full doses, serotonergic psychedelic. I don't know. Whatever. Furthermore, anecdotal evidence supporting that microdosing psychedelics can increase creativity and problem-solving abilities, as well as promote cognitive flexibility and positively affect empathy and reduce levels of mind wandering. Some individuals microdose to self-medicate for cluster headaches, depression, and anxiety, among other conditions. Indeed, it has been proposed that microdosing with psychedelics could have therapeutic value for the treatment of mental health disorders. The use of low doses of psychedelics constitutes an attractive therapeutic model, since it could circumvent the potential issues associated with altered consciousness and challenging experiences elicited by higher doses. Owing to its origin as an underground practice, microdosing lacks standardized procedures that are accepted and replicated by the community. Right. I think they're largely people just experimenting, whatever, haphazardly, in a, I think, largely uncontrolled way, consuming small quantities of the substances. Different serotonergic psychedelics are used for this purpose, such as lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD, dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, popularized by, Rogan and his ilk, ingested with a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, or MAOI, as in the concoction known as ayahuasca, and psilocybin, the active compound of several mushrooms in the psilocybe genus. The most frequently used compounds are LSD and psilocybin, the latter in the form of dried psychoactive mushrooms. There is considerable variability in dose and dosing schedules. Perhaps the most popular dosing schedule was proposed by James Fadiman, consisting of 1 dosing day followed by 2 days without dosing. Dosing periods are also highly variable, ranging between 1 week to several years. In the case of psilocybin mushroom, microdoses are within the range of 0.1 grams to 0.5 grams of dried mushroom material, with 0.1 grams considered roughly equivalent to 4.6 micrograms of LSD. So I guess this is, well, I guess they are trying to, stay in the lane of microdosing, I guess in the microgram range. I guess technically you can take 10,000 micrograms of, I guess, LSD or mushroom. I guess you're still technically in the microgram range, and thus microdosing. But yeah, I'm curious, like, what is the exact, range microdosing? So I'm probably like, well, yeah, where are my legs? The efficacy of microdosing to enhance mood, creativity, and cognition, and to reduce anxiety and depression is supported by anecdotal accounts, and more recently by online surveys, observational, and open-label studies. Unfortunately, these studies lack adequate controls and are based on self-selected samples, rendering them vulnerable to confirmatory bias. It is important to note that expectations, which are generally positive in the context of recent scientific studies, play an important role in the perceived effects of microdosing with psychedelics, both for researchers and participants. Yeah, so as I mentioned, or alluded to, and as I think they're explicitly saying, not a lot of great research, and even the limited research that's available, not the highest quality. And that, you have anecdotal, data or experiences, and you have observational studies. And it seems like this might be like one of the first, or like one of the few. They're trying to, well, I guess, explicitly carry out a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. But, psychedelic research is in its infancy, and just appears to be taking off more and more. I have no doubt that more research like this is out. If, in fact, I think this one largely finds no benefit, but I'm sure if there is a randomized control trial that finds a benefit, that'll be pursued. But at some point, I guess, probably have to give up on exploring the question. The thing that really bugs me about the term microdosing is, in my experience, people take like 1-2 grams, so it's not micro. Yeah, so that's where it's like, the scientist in me comes out. I was like, what are we talking about when it comes to microdosing? Like, what is the actual dosage range? And like, are people actually following it? But I'm also, from a personal standpoint, like, I'm ignorant on recreational psychedelic use. Pretty much the only things that I know about psychedelics just comes from the research that I read, and I have zero first-hand experience. But it's like, for all I know, like, maybe people are doing it in a controlled manner. But at least based off of the couple of people that I know personally doing it, doesn't seem all that controlled. Where was I? Yes, the efficacy of microdosing to enhance mood, creativity, and cognition, and to reduce anxiety and depression is supported by... Oh yeah, I already read that. My bad. So indeed, low doses of LSD can have effects that are different or even opposite to those expected by individuals who microdose. Nevertheless, other reports have documented positive and dose-dependent enhancements in mood, emotional cognition, and aesthetic perception, as well as significant improvements in emotional state, anxiety, energy, and creativity, among other relevant variables. Importantly, some of these results could be explained by unblinding of the experimental condition, that is, by subjects correctly distinguishing the placebo from the active dose. In spite of several recent studies addressing the effects of microdosing on mental health, mood, creativity, and cognition, the physiological and neurobiological levels have been less investigated. In terms of brain activity, a study using functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, showed that a very low dose of LSD sufficed to alter the functional connectivity between the amygdala and several cortical regions. Moreover, some of these changes were correlated with self-reported assessments of positive mood. EEG is capable of robustly identifying the acute effects of different psychedelics, which result in broadband increases in signal entropy and specific changes, blah, blah, blah. Yes. Going over, pretty much the effects at the level of the brain. We investigate the effects of low doses of psilocybin cubensis on behavior, creativity, divergent and convergent thinking, perception, cognition, and the underlying brain activity, measured with EEG, with emphasis on controlling for expectation without introducing an artificial motivation for microdosing. Recruited individuals who were planning to start a microdosing protocol. Yes. So, the experimental condition. A gel capsule with either 0.5 grams of dried psilocybin cubensis or the same weight of an inactive placebo. I'm curious what their inactive placebo was unknown to both participants and experimenters and was only revealed after conclusion of data collection and analysis. But again, so I don't know what it's like to consume any amount of psilocybin. And definitely, obviously, no experience with microdosing then. So it's like, when you microdose, like, do you feel any sort of subjective effects? Like, basically, masking sort of similar to what we covered before. Like, can you actually do a fully blinded trial on microdosing? Sort of like, and people clue in whether they're getting the microdosing of psilocybin or not. I have no idea what it's like to microdose and that you actually feel anything at all. So, what are the participants? Not going to dissect, just highlight. 34 participants, 11 females, so mostly males. And they had previous experiences with serotonergic psychedelics, of which were considered challenging. All participants were fluent in Spanish, had normal or corrected to normal vision, and successfully completed all instances of the experiment. Ethics in accordance with, research ethics. Good to know. Yes, the black sauce and the mushroom is psilocybin. In my experience, colloquial microdose, absolutely yes. It would be fun to do a blind trial with friends or something. Yeah, with a true, that's why it's like, with the MDMA, if you're actually getting MDMA, just like in this trial, the vast majority, like 94, 95%, like they know that they're getting MDMA. And there's like, 1 or 2 exceptions where it's like, I don't know if I got the MDMA. With microdosing, I guess, if I'll obviously take your word for it. Like if there are subjective effects of even a microdose of psilocybin, but it'd be good to, as you say, run that experiment, that blind trial with friends, of like give your friends with I guess their consent, of like, hey, you might be getting placebo or the microdose. I'm like, can you tell whether you got the microdose or not? Because as we saw in the placebo group with the MDMA, some people in the placebo group, actually a decent amount, like I think it was 20%, or like 9 out of 40, they thought they were getting MDMA when in fact got placebo. But the control is... yeah, exactly. So yeah, so self-reported scales aim to assess psychological traits 2 days before the first dosing, yeah, and afterwards they perform different tasks and activities. So it looks like they're doing a little bit more, not just going by only self-reported scales. They're getting them to do, you know, activities and tasks. And we assess the following questionnaires. Okay, so they do the big five inventory. So they assess personality, you know, the conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness, and extrovert. That big five. So they're doing a personality assessment. And then anxiety inventory, suggestibility scale, positive and negative affect, mind wandering scale. So yeah, a whole bunch of assessment. From personality to cognition, etc., etc. And then we ask participants about their expectation of change in the following domains. Positive emotion, so yeah. I guess also trying to assess expectation. What do you expect to happen if in fact you get the microdose? So here's the overall workflow of got. So active. Oh, they're using the Matrix convention, the red versus the blue pill. I highly doubt it actually. Well, it for sure didn't look like that. Like the pills should look the same in both groups. But the red pill, that's the active. I'm assuming it's just coincidence that they're using the red and blue pill convention, but maybe not. Maybe that's intentional. So yeah, red is the active, blue is placebo, and then blinding. Okay. Their heat map. I don't know what back with assessing this map here. Not that it matters all that much. And they do an EEG recording, local global auditory stimulation paradigm. Okay. Measures collected for each condition, including the domain they target, acronyms, and when they were tamed during the experiment. Baseline, first dose and day, or daily. Okay. And they also assess physical activity. And they do it by, it seems like, by actually monitoring activity with the Fitbit Charge 4. Okay, yeah. Each participant consumed a total of 1 gram of dried psilocybin cubensis for the active condition, separated in 2 doses of 0.5 grams. Samples were dried at 28 degrees, I assume that's Celsius, and ground into a fine powder, with different parts of the mushrooms homogeneously distributed. In total, there were 3 independent sources for the mushrooms that were consumed in the context of this experiment. Samples of 150 milligrams were collected from these sources and sent for chemical analysis to the Laboratory of Forensic Analysis of Biologically Active Substances. Yes. So it looks like they, yeah, in addition to like growing it and processing it, you know, under laboratory conditions, it seems like they also did an actual quantification or, you know, actually assessing how much psilocybin or the compounds that are in there through, you know, yeah, LCMS or liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry. And so, yeah, psilocybin, you have 640 micrograms per gram, and psilocin, and all these other compounds. So, yeah, at least they're trying to assess, you know, put numbers to, like, what it is that they're actually consuming and giving the psilocybin with a microdose. Dude. Some of these figures. Nothing super exciting. So, what are their overall results? According to our results, 0.5 grams of dried mushroom material did not present significantly positive impact on creativity, divergent and convergent thinking, cognition, physical activity levels, and self-reported measures of mental health and well-being. However, we observed a trend towards impaired performance in some cognitive tasks, attentional blink, and Stroop, the Stroop task, which, if I remember correctly, that's basically, getting people to, look at the words of colors, and like getting people really hard to explain. But essentially, the Stroop task is sit people down, and like you flash the text of colors on the screen, like let's say for example the color red, but like the text is going to say red, but text is going to be colored blue. You get them to pretty much like call out whether or to assess the actual color of the text, or like what the text of the word is saying. I probably like butchered that description totally. That's essentially what it is in a nutshell. Yeah. Where it's like, you're just shown the text of colors, but there's a mismatch, and you basically get them to pretty much clue in on one thing, either the text or the color. And you basically have to like filter out the relevant information. Of like when purple is colored green, like, and you ask them to focus on the word instead of the color. People make mistakes when purple is colored green, and you get them to pay attention to the text. They'll say green, for example. Basically, more or less, sort of like assessing, their ability to like filter out, or like either filter out or focus in on the relevant information. Not enough to be creative, enough to be impaired. Yeah, exactly. But again, this is one study, and even though I think they were like, in my non-expert opinion, it seems like they're being pretty thorough of like doing multiple level of assessments, assessing personality, cognition, physical activity, actually doing EEG recordings. So they're not just going by whatever self-report. In contrast, the overall acute effects induced by the microdose, the AS total score, were significant, although they lacked consistency across participants. We also found decreased EEG power in the theta band under psilocybin, which is consistent with the broadband spectral power reductions reported for higher doses, which I do not know exactly what that means. That's where I would need to consult a neuroscientist. Ample anecdotal evidence suggests that microdosing can improve mood, well-being, creativity, and cognition, and recent uncontrolled open-label observational studies have provided some empirical support for these claims. While encouraging, these studies are vulnerable to experimental biases, including confirmation bias and placebo effects. This is especially problematic in the case of microdosing. Users make up a self-selected sample with optimistic expectations about the outcome of the practice. This positivity bias, combined with the low doses and self-assessment of the drug effects via scales and questionnaires, paves the way for a strong placebo response. Right, so like, the microdosing community, might be placeboing themselves into all the positive effects that they are reporting. But again, one study, not the be-all and end-all of microdosing. To date, we could identify relatively few human studies of microdosing with psychedelics following a rigorous experimental design. The first was conducted by Yanakieva and colleagues, who investigated 3 comparatively low doses of LSD, 5, 10, and 20 micrograms, concluding that LSD affected the estimation of time intervals without other significant changes in perception, mental processes, and concentration. However, the researchers did not assess the pre-existing motivations and expectations of the participants, and the laboratory setting of the experiment might have contributed to their suboptimal performance. Bershad and colleagues investigated an inactive placebo and 3 different doses of LSD, 6.3, 13, and 26 micrograms. Dosing regimen, whatever, dosage, variety, separated by 1-week intervals, but I'm sure there's some rationale behind that. At the highest dose, the drug increased ratings of vigor and slightly decreased positivity ratings of images with positive emotional content. Measurements of mood, cognition, and physiological responses did not show differences between conditions. It's like giving drama kids fake alcohol. They'll start singing. Yes. Oh, and actually, I'm gonna like do a whole stream, devoted to like the placebo effect. And sort of as a testament to the placebo effect. I'm gonna cover this. Let's have it here. Too many. Need to keep better track. Oh. I know. You're just I not save this study? I'm almost 100% certain I saved. Now I'm just like more determined than ever to, because it was literally assessing steroid use, or let's say dummy steroid use, in runners, and that like basically if you administer a placebo to a group of runners, but you tell them that it's steroids or a performance-enhancing drug, you actually get performance benefits. Basically, you can placebo them into performance enhancements, and no active drug. I'm gonna have to dig it up, but I know that I have it. I've put it in the wrong folder. Oh well, too bad. I have to dig it up again. So, another study by the same group showed that a low dose of LSD increased amygdala seed-based connectivity with the right angular gyrus, right middle frontal gyrus, and the cerebellum, and decreased amygdala connectivity with the left and right post-central gyrus and the superior temporal gyrus. Although this dose of LSD had weak effects on mood, they were positively correlated with the increase in amygdala middle frontal gyrus, blah, blah, blah. I mean, yeah, the amygdala, generally speaking, threat detection center in the brain, although it has other functions as well, but I think it's largely responsible for that. Hutton and colleagues reported dose-dependent positive effects on mood, but also anxiety and cognitive impairment. Also, the same group showed that low doses of LSD can increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor blood plasma levels in healthy volunteers. Finally, both Getty et al. And Van Elk et al. Combined double-blind placebo-controlled design with field measurements under natural conditions. Both found positive effects of microdosing on the primary outcome of their respective studies. However, these results could be explained by breaking of the placebo condition. In particular, Van Elk et al. Found that more than 60% of the participants were breaking blind to the experimental condition, consistent with the unblinding rate found in our study. So yeah, it seems like there's issues, understandably, with blinding and psychedelics. Can you actually carry out a truly blind study on psychedelics? Our results add to this series of double-blind placebo-controlled studies, questioning the validity of anecdotal evidence for microdosing in comparison to previous studies. Most results remain negative, even when the statistical analyses were restricted to measurements obtained from unblinded subjects, with the exception of the VAS total scores of acute effects. We note, however, that Bayesian statistics suggested insufficient sample size for the blinded group, a limitation to be overcome by future studies. Overall, few uncorrected differences found. In the case of tasks to assess cognitive function, these differences were indicative of impaired performance, which is consistent with previous experiments and with the observation that higher doses of serotonergic psychedelics negatively affect cognitive functions such as attention and decision making. It has also been suggested that psychedelics might facilitate visual perception by increasing the broadband of consciously perceived information. This was supported by studies of binocular rivalry, showing that 2 doses of psilocybin, 150 micrograms per kilogram and 250 micrograms per kilogram, slowed down the rate of binocular rivalry switching and increased the proportion of reports of mixed percepts. Our study failed to replicate these findings, possibly due to the lower effective dose of psilocybin contained in the mushroom preparations. Also, we directly investigated the potential influence of microdosing on conscious perception using a backward masking paradigm for visual perception, and the global local paradigm combined with EEG or ERP analysis of global and local deviance for auditory perception. Neither of these tasks revealed a significant effect of psilocybin cubensis microdosing on conscious information processing. We found reduced power of EEG theta oscillations during the effects of a psilocybin microdose, heralding the larger broadband reductions observed for higher doses. But again, whether these changes in EEG theta oscillations, or let's say positive or negative, that's not for me to say, because I'm not a neuroscientist. I cannot interpret theta oscillation. However, the analysis by Lempel-Ziv complexity failed to reveal differences between conditions, suggesting that increased signal entropy constitute, yes. Reduced vigilance is a potential non-pharmacological mechanism underlying the observed changes in. Given that theta power is increased as vigilance is reduced, the result would be consistent with participants becoming drowsy under the placebo while maintaining alertness under the active dose. This explanation is consistent with a slightly stimulant effect of the psilocybin microdose. However, changes in vigilance would be expected to affect other frequency bands as well. This was not observed in data. Daily levels of physical activity constitute a proxy of the potential effects of microdosing on mood and well-being. The relationship between physical activity and mental health is well established, has been adopted as a marker of treatment efficacy for depression. Currently, the potential association between changes in physical activity levels and psychedelic use remains unexplored. While our results do not reveal an effect of microdosing on this domain, future studies could further this investigation using higher doses of serotonergic psychedelics, both in healthy and clinical populations, and conducting measurements over longer time. While the study of microdosing with psilocybin cubensis mushrooms presents advantages in terms of ecological validity, it also raises problems associated with unknown or inconsistent chemical composition. We analyzed the contents of 3 samples pooled together, estimating an effective dose of 0.9 milligrams of psilocybin. However, this dose could have been higher or lower depending on the source of the mushrooms consumed by each participant. Also, we did not correct the effective psilocybin dose using the weight of the participant. While this adjustment might not be necessary for larger doses, its importance for microdosing remains unexplored, right? So they're not customizing the doses, and that may have some sort of effect where, yeah, I mean, it is pretty standard when it comes to other, substances or therapies. It's weight-based, and you have to adjust based off of how much the patient weighs. That might be the case, or it seems like they're alluding to that when it comes to psilocybin. The amount of psilocin found in our samples is within the expected values for the mushrooms or truffles that are consumed in the context of microdosing. In particular, it is almost identical to the values reported by Prochaskova et al. Nevertheless, other recent studies use truffles with higher concentrations of psilocin and psilocybin. For instance, Van Elk and colleagues investigated the effects of 0.7 grams of psilocybin-containing truffles, with an estimated amount of 1.5 milligrams of psilocybin per dose. As acknowledged by the authors of this study, 0.7 grams exceeds what is frequently considered the upper limit when microdosing with psilocybin mushroom. Note, however, that what constitutes microdosing is not precisely defined. Right. That is pretty much what I thought before reading this study. What are we talking about exactly when microdosing? It is also important to consider the possibility that our samples lost potency between the experiment and their chemical analysis. As shown by Gottvoldova and colleagues, the concentration of psilocybin can drop up to 50% during the first months of storage, which in our case would imply original concentrations similar to those reported by Van Elk and colleagues. Finally, our samples contained small amounts of baeocystin and norbaeocystin. Whether these compounds are psychoactive in humans is still under. It is possible that the experimental design of this study was not optimal to detect some of the claimed positive effects of microdosing. Right? So even though this is a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, and it doesn't appear to support the notion that there are beneficial aspects to microdosing, this is not the be-all and end-all, that the case is not closed when it comes to microdosing, and there might just be something built into their experimental design, or maybe there's some other benefits that they're not assessing for when it comes to microdosing. So you can only measure and assess what you're looking at, and even though they looked at multiple things, maybe there are other things that they're not looking at where you might see a beneficial effect of microdosing. We investigated the effects of 2 doses per week, yet microdosing is generally conducted over extended periods of time according to an ample variety of dosing schedules. By design, our study could not assess the cumulative effects of microdoses over periods of several days. Right, so there might just be an issue of time. And if this study lasted longer, and that microdosing for longer, and maybe, the beneficial effects might kick in. Instead, we decided to include time-consuming assessments which required active participation of the research team, for example, computer-based cognitive tasks, EEG, which were too disruptive to be repeated routinely for an extended period of time, but at the same time addressed comparatively understudied potential effects of microdosing. Oh yeah, that is the trade-off. One of the standard trade-offs comes to scientific research. It's like, in my non-expert opinion, they were collecting, I would say, higher resolution data. They're not just going by reports of the people that are taking the microdoses and, their subjective experience. They're trying to get some sort of objective assessment and like measuring, brain activity with EEG. But as they highlight, these are intensive assessments. And not only do you have to have, trained professionals, technicians, researchers carry out these assessments and analyze the data, you also need to get the people in the study to comply. And it's like, if they need to undergo these intensive assessments regularly, who wants to do that over the course of like 6 months, a year, or like 2 years? And so kind of, took the trade-off. It's like, well, we'll cut the study short, okay? And then, as they say, maybe by design, you cannot assess the potential beneficial effects of long-term microdosing. But we can do intensive assessments on the people and get that high-resolution data. But, the ideal scenario, the high-resolution data, and you're tracking these people for long periods of time. And they're doing, multiple assessments over, months, years, whatever. But getting people to do that and recruiting people to do that is a challenge. So, due to the buildup of tolerance after repeated administration of serotonergic psychedelics, we speculated that the intensity of these effects could only decrease in time, further motivating our focus on the acute effects of microdosing instead of its potential cumulative effects. This decision was also based on the variability of microdosing schedules adopted by users and represented in the current literature. which raises the concern of schedule-specific results as an obstacle to address the consistency of findings between studies. Future research should explore whether the positive effects of microdosing can be selectively enabled or facilitated by certain long-term dosing schedules. So yeah, even though, again, they're not finding any real significant positive effects of microdosing, they are calling for more research and ideally a more long-term study. And also, this study was conducted in healthy participants, and thus the lack of significant findings could stem from ceiling effects. It remains possible that microdoses of psilocybin mushrooms exert positive effects on cognition and mental health, but only in populations of patients already suffering from impairments in domains, right? So how much, if you're studying a healthy population, what is your expectation of improvements? As they explicitly say, it might just be the ceiling effect. And where if they're, if these are healthy individuals and they have no measurable deficits in cognition or mental health, then what do you expect as the outcome? But maybe if you're looking at a different population of people that have some sort of deficit, either in cognition or some sort of mental health issue, maybe you'd actually see effects. So again, case is not closed. So wrapping up, in conclusion, we conducted a controlled study of microdosing in individuals who were already planning to start their own microdosing protocol. While small amounts of dried psilocybe cubensis mushrooms reliably induce significant subjective effects, their impact on other domains was negligible or even indicative of impaired performance. Clearly, more research is needed to decide whether microdosing with psychedelics can deliver at least some of its promised positive effects. This future research should also explore the potential impact of microdosing on aspects of human physiology that could compromise its long-term safety. For instance, by addressing the potential consequences of chronic 5-HT2B receptor stimulation on the health of the circulatory system, among other important points. Though this research is conducted, it remains impossible to ascertain that long-term microdosing is a safe practice with the desirable effects, and to rule out that these effects arise as a consequence of expectation or confirmation bias. Right. So, I think a good thing to sort of wrap up. Basically, just more questions to answer. And that even though this might be discouraging to those who believe in the beneficial effects of microdosing, just more research needs to be done. Or it may just be a matter of research. So, that is pretty much all of the studies that I wanted to go over. A deep dive on this one, and then the highlights are just overall cursory this one. So with that, I think we're gonna end the stream here. Well, that's why I want to emphasize that case is not closed. Well, so only share if you're comfortable, but is it something that you have explored, are exploring, looking to explore, or just out of curiosity, but only share if you're comfortable. Or don't don't share anything that you share. Yeah, totally fair. And I'm curious as well. And I'm, that's why, one of the reasons why I follow the psychedelic research pretty closely. But again, I have zero personal experience so far with psychedelics. But a lot of the research that's coming out seems to be super cool. And I think the psychedelic that I seem to cover the most, and that seems to have the most research behind it, is MDMA. And I've covered it before. Where is it? Have way too many. Yes. one of the reasons why I find MDMA so interesting. Is because, like, yeah, I've covered this before. But there was this interesting case study of like MDMA uh, change, changing someone's like political affiliation or outlook. Or as they say here, can MDMA change socio-political values? Insights from a research participant. Oh, well, thank you so much for the kind words. And I totally look forward to that stream as well with Lesbian Hot Sauce. And shout out to them, which I should do. Because, yeah, going over the research on long COVID. And I'm pretty sure that's how you spell their username. Get it wrong. I apologize. Yeah, going over the long COVID research and chronic disease fatigue syndrome should be interesting. But yeah, I covered this case study earlier that I thought was super interesting because like it was totally like a side effect or an unexpected effect of MDMA research, where like this research group, they were trying to do an actual like, you know, controlled study with MDMA, and then like one participant like stood out, where in the process of doing a study, a larger study on MDMA, it seems like this one participant's political values changed, and they basically like made that shift from like a far right extremist to, you know, way more left leaning. And there's also an associated BBC article that goes through like well, pretty much like their transition, because like they basically at one point they were like they were in a white supremacist group and like a high-ranking like official in a white supremacist group, and then after this or after going through this study and having the experience with MDMA, yeah, they made like this almost like complete 180. Yes, I can definitely should be able to get it. Moment. You might not have full access, although I believe I've posted this in Discord, but also if you just DM me, I can send you the PDF. But that should be it, but I think it might be behind paywall. But I should maybe just link. I'll link this. I'm not gonna go over because I already have. This is the BBC article. Published, yeah, a few months ago, this summer. How a dose of MDMA transformed a white supremacist. And it is based off of this biological psychiatry. This is just like a case study or like a correspondence. But it's super cool. And like yeah, their experience with MDMA and like the shift that they made in terms of like politics and like just their outlook on life, super interesting. And I encourage everyone to read it. And maybe just a testament the potential power of MDMA, how it appears to, you know, increase empathy and kind of like well, yeah, just pro-social effects, and like just, yeah, greater feelings of connectedness to humanity at large. That seems to be at play with this person here. So this, so yeah, definitely gonna cover this, and thank you, Socrates. This. But with that, that's pretty much everything that I want to cover. I definitely have other things that I plan to cover tomorrow, but I'm still debating what I'm going to cover tomorrow. But yeah, all that to say, I plan to be back tomorrow. Let's see if I can find someone to raid. Let's see. Ooh, Astro. I rated Astro Canuck yesterday. Not that rating 2 days in a row I see as a bad thing. Well, given the fact that Astro Canuck is also in the middle of like a subathon and they're making a push, that Partner Plus, gonna raid into them and set. Can't really ever go wrong with Astro Canuck, at least in my opinion. But yeah, thank you everyone for passing by. Super appreciated. Wildcat, slightly caffeinated, and also shout out to Slightly Caffeinated, also a fellow science and gaming streamer. I'm trying to also start my gaming content creation. I only do right now really old school retro games of Dr. Mario, and Mario 3 and Tetris. And thank you, Lesbian Hot Sauce, and Socrates, and Nitsua, and Bob Marley, and also thank you so much, Wick, for the raid, and thank you so much for the follows, Rooks and Ponpilled, Admiral Gibbs, Oak Heckett, I apologize if I mispronounced that, Brian Lore, thank you so much for the follow, and if I forgot anybody, I apologize. Thank you for the gifted sub, the peer review, and shout out to them. Ocho Gringo, Nitsua 212, Zesty 459, No Pants Kyle. And if I forget anybody, I apologize. And again, shout out to Wick for the raid. Super generous. Super appreciated. Yeah, hey. Believe me, I'm more than down. Like, just look at my channel trailer. I'm down, like, I was a health and fitness streamer at one point. And that's something that I want to start doing again. So, believe me, I'm more or less ready when you are. Sort of. I don't know, because when I did my workout streams, they were at like a private gym that I rented out. I might have to do some things to do a home workout. But yeah, we're gonna raid into Astro Canuck because they're an astrophotography, science and tech streamer. They're Canadian, and they have a great interactive stream setup. And also, they're in the middle of a subathon and really going for that Partner Plus push. And they also do Lego builds as well. So yeah, if you're not following them, you absolutely should be. I plan to be back tomorrow at roughly the same time, maybe a little bit earlier. I pretty much post when I go live or about to go live in the Discord. And if you want to join the Discord to ask questions, suggest stream topics, and post science memes, those are always welcome as well. And pretty much it. So yeah, thank you everyone. Super appreciated. And until next time, take care, be well, be kind. And if you're not following Astro Canuck, definitely should be.
Minute 54. What? Oh god. We have 1 minute 54 seconds, 45 seconds remaining. Demo!